I buried my wife on Friday, and the very next day, my son looked at me with eyes colder than the grave dirt, still fresh on my boots, took my wallet and said, "Dad, your good life is over." But he did not know that every word he spoke, every threat he made, and every dollar he planned to steal was being recorded by someone watching from the shadows. My name is Malachi Jeffers. I am 68 years old, and for 40 years I have let the world believe I am just a simple mechanic with grease permanently etched into my fingerprints. I live in a neighborhood that real estate agents now call up and coming, but used to just call the ghetto. My house has peeling paint on the porch, and my truck has rust on the fenders. To my son Tyrone and his wife Courtney, I am a relic, a stubborn old man clinging to a life of poverty. They represent everything I am not: polished, corporate, and hungry for status. They do not know that the grease on my hands built an empire of industrial patents worth millions. They do not know that the man they see as a burden is actually the silent hand feeding their lavish lifestyle. Before I tell you how I brought their world crashing down around them, let me know in the comments if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that respect is earned, not inherited. The funeral reception was still happening in my backyard. The folding tables were covered in untouched potato salad and cold fried chicken. The air was thick with the smell of lilies and insincere condolences. Neighbors were still hugging me, telling me how much they would miss Etta, my beautiful Etta, who was the only person in the world who knew the weight of the bank accounts we hid. But while the guests were still drinking iced tea, I noticed Courtney was missing. She had not been by Tyrone's side for 20 minutes. I excused myself from a weeping neighbor and walked into the house. The silence inside was heavy, broken only by the sound of drawers being ripped open. It was coming from my study, a small room off the kitchen where I kept my bills, and Etta kept her sewing patterns. The door was cracked open. I pushed it wide, and there was Courtney, my daughter-in-law, still wearing her black funeral dress, ripping through the filing cabinet like a raccoon digging through a trash can. Papers were flying everywhere: Etta's medical records, the deed to the house, old birthday cards. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice low and steady. The sound made her jump, but she did not look ashamed. She looked annoyed. She smoothed her dress and turned to face me with that look she always gave me, a mix of pity and disgust. "We are looking for the life insurance policy, Malachi." Courtney said she never called me Dad, only Malachi. "Tyrone says you probably hid it or forgot where it was. We need to make sure the claim is filed immediately. Funerals are expensive, and we know you do not have the liquidity to cover this mess." She called my wife's funeral a mess. My hands curled into fists by my sides. "Get out of my office, Courtney. These are private papers." She laughed a dry, sharp sound. "You do not have privacy anymore, Malachi. You have supervision. Without Etta, you are just a confused old man in a house that is falling apart. We are doing this for your own good." I stepped forward, intending to usher her out of the room. But suddenly, a heavy hand landed on my shoulder and shoved me back hard. I stumbled, hitting my hip against the doorframe. It was Tyrone, my son. He stood in the hallway, loosening his tie, his face a mask of stone. "Don't you dare touch my wife, Dad." Tyrone spat the words out. He stepped into the room, filling the space. He was a big man, tall and broad, but he wore his suits like armor to hide the fact that he was soft inside. I looked at him, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball, the boy I had sat up with when he had fevers, the boy I had secretly paid tuition for so he could attend a private university. "Your wife is ransacking my house while your mother is not even cold in the ground. Tyrone, is this how you mourn? Mourning does not pay the bills." "Dad." Tyrone walked past me and picked up a stack of envelopes from the desk. "Look at this: electric bill, water bill, property tax notices. You are drowning here. We know you live check to check. We are taking over, starting now." He did not ask. He announced it. He reached out and snatched the old leather wallet from my back pocket. I was too stunned to react. He opened it and pulled out my debit card and my credit card. He looked at them with a sneer. "Basic checking, high-interest credit card. Pathetic," Tyrone muttered. He pocketed the cards and tossed the empty wallet back onto the desk. Then he held out his hand. "Give me the keys to the truck." "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling, not with fear, but with a rage I had not felt since my days working the assembly line. "Because you are a liability," Courtney chimed in, stepping up beside him. She placed a hand on Tyrone's arm, marking her territory. "You are old, Malachi. Your eyesight is going. You are going to hurt someone or yourself driving that rust bucket. Besides, we can't have you driving around wasting gas money on nonsense, or worse, gambling or drinking. I have never touched alcohol in my life. Etta and I were deacons in the church. We lived simply because we chose to, not because we had to. But they had created a narrative in their heads that I was incompetent, a senile old fool who needed to be managed. I looked at Tyrone, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to say, 'Courtney, he is my father. He is a good man.' But he didn't. He just snapped his fingers. 'Keys, Dad. Now. Do not make me take them.' I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys to the 20-year-old Ford pickup parked in the driveway. The metal felt cold in my hand. I dropped them into Tyrone's palm. 'Good,' Tyrone said, closing his fist around them. 'From now on, Courtney will handle the grocery shopping. We will give you a small cash allowance for incidentals. No more than $50 a week. That should be enough for a man with no social life. We are going to convert the master bedroom into an office for me, so you can move your things to the attic. It is smaller and easier for you to keep clean.' The attic. It was a dusty, cramped space with a single window that leaked when it rained. They were evicting me from the bed I had shared with my wife for 40 years in my own house. 'This is my house, Tyrone,' I said quietly. 'The deed is in my name.' 'Actually,' Courtney said, smiling a smile that did not reach her eyes, 'we checked the laws. Since Etta died intestate, and you were demonstrating signs of cognitive decline, we can petition for conservatorship. We are doing you a favor, Malachi. We are stopping you from losing everything.' Cognitive decline. The audacity took my breath away. They had planned this. They had not been mourning Etta. They had been plotting how to carve up the carcass of my life the moment she was gone. Tyrone looked at his watch. 'Listen, we have to get back to the guests. You stay. Here, try not to embarrass us anymore today. Go upstairs and start packing your things for the attic. We want the master bedroom cleared out by tomorrow morning.' They turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there amidst the scattered papers of my life. My hip throbbed where Tyrone had shoved me. My wallet lay empty on the desk. My wife was gone, and my son had become a monster. I stood there for a long time, listening to the murmur of the party outside. I heard Tyrone laughing with a colleague, probably boasting about his promotion or his new project. He had no idea that the promotion he was so proud of was influenced by a call I made to a board member I played golf with. He had no idea that the luxury car he drove was paid for by a trust fund I replenished every month, disguised as a corporate bonus. He looked at the cards in his pocket and thought he had cut off my supply. He thought he had taken my power because he held a piece of plastic with a $2,000 limit. He was a fool. I walked over to the desk and picked up my empty wallet. I smoothed out the papers Courtney had thrown on the floor. Then, I looked up at the smoke detector mounted in the corner of the ceiling. A tiny red light blinked once, imperceptibly. My neighbor Kofi, a brilliant 19-year-old kid I had been mentoring in computer engineering, had installed that system for me a week ago, when I first suspected Tyrone was snooping around. It was a closed-circuit audio and video system, cloud-based, completely hidden. I looked directly into the lens, and my grief hardened into something cold and heavy, like a steel beam. "You want my life, Tyrone?" I whispered to the empty room. "You want to treat me like a child and steal what you think I have. You have no idea what you just started." I picked up a photo of Etta from the desk frame. Her smile was warm, her eyes full of the secret we shared. "Do not worry, my love," I said to her picture. "I am not going to let them destroy what we built. I am going to teach our son the hardest lesson of his life." I walked out of the office, my head bowed, my shoulders slumped, playing the part of the defeated old man. But inside I was calculating. The war had begun, and they had just made the mistake of bringing a knife to a nuclear fight. The next morning started with the metallic click of a lock tumbling into place. But it was not the sound of safety, it was the sound of a prison cell closing. I had woken up early, as I always do, a habit from 40 years of being on the shop floor. By 6 in the morning, I stepped out onto the back porch to check the tomato plants Etta had planted just weeks before she passed. The air was heavy and gray, smelling of ozone and wet asphalt, threatening a storm. When I turned back to the door to go inside and start the coffee, the handle would not turn. I jiggled it, thinking it was just stuck. The wood of this house swells in the humidity, and I had been meaning to plane the frame down for months. But it was not the wood. I looked closely at the lock. Cylinder. It was shiny, bright brass, completely new. They had changed the locks while I slept. I knocked on the glass pane of the door, gently at first, then harder. The sky opened up and the rain began to fall, cold and stinging. I stood there in my undershirt and pajama pants, shivering as the water soaked through the thin cotton. I was 68 years old, locked out of the home I had paid for brick by brick, standing in the rain like a stray dog. 10 minutes passed. The water dripped from my nose and chin. Finally, the kitchen curtain twitched. Courtney's face appeared behind the glass, looking annoyed, not concerned. She took her time unlocking the door. She opened it and stood in the threshold, blocking my way in. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a steaming mug of coffee. My coffee. "Oh, Malachi," she said, her voice dripping with fake surprise. "We did not know you were out here. Tyrone had a locksmith come late last night. We needed high-security locks. This neighborhood is getting dangerous, you know. You really should not be wandering outside without supervision. You might get confused and get lost." She stepped back, allowing me to enter, but she did not offer a towel. She did not apologize. She looked at my wet clothes with disdain, as if I had soiled her carpet on purpose. I walked past her, feeling the chill settle deep in my bones. It was not the cold rain that made me shiver. It was the realization of my new reality. I was no longer the master of this house. I was an inmate, and the warden had just made it clear that my access to my own life was now a privilege, not a right. I went upstairs to dry off and change, but when I reached the landing, I saw that the door to the master bedroom was wide open. The room I had shared with Etta for 3 decades was in chaos. My clothes were piled in heap in the hallway. My suits, my work shirts, even the tie I wore to my wedding were thrown together like garbage. Inside the room, Tyrone was directing 2 men I did not recognize. They were moving a massive, modern glass desk into the center of the room, right where our bed used to be. "What is this?" I asked, my voice rising. The bed, Etta's vanity, the photos of our anniversary, everything was gone. Tyrone turned around. He was wearing a Bluetooth headset and holding a tablet. He looked at me as if I were a delivery driver interrupting a meeting. "We are repurposing the space, Dad," Tyrone said, tapping the screen of his tablet. "I need a home office. A CEO needs a proper environment to conduct business, and this room has the best light. The guest room was too small, and frankly, it smelled like old people." He was calling himself a CEO. The boy who had never managed anything more than a mid-level construction team was playing executive in his dead mother's bedroom. "Where are my things?" I asked, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "Attic," Courtney said, coming up the stairs behind me. "We moved everything to the attic. It is cozy up there, Malachi. You will have your own space away from the hustle and bustle of blood." Tyrone's business. "We put a cot up there and a space heater. It will be just like a little apartment for you." The attic was an unfinished space with exposed insulation and a single window that did not open. In the summer it reached 100 degrees. In the winter it was an icebox. They were not giving me a room, they were putting me in storage. I looked at Tyrone, expecting him to exhibit some shame, expecting him to say, "Courtney is joking, Dad. You are staying in the guest room." But he didn't. He just looked at the glass desk and said, "Make sure you do not scratch the floor, guys. That is original hardwood." My chest tightened. A sharp pain radiated down my left arm. It was stress, purely stress, but I saw an opportunity. I wanted to know. I needed to know for sure if there was any humanity left in them. I gasped loudly and grabbed my chest. I stumbled and slid down the doorframe, landing heavily on the floor. I groaned, clutching my shirt, mimicking the symptoms of a heart attack I had seen 100 times. "On television, Dad," Tyrone said, but he did not rush to me. He did not drop his tablet. He stayed by the desk, annoyance flashing across his face. "Oh God," Courtney sighed, leaning against the banister. "Is he having an episode? Call 911, I wheezed, acting the part perfectly. "Help me." Tyrone looked at Courtney, then at his watch. He did not move toward me. He did not check my pulse. "We have the investors coming for a video call in 20 minutes, Tyrone hissed to his wife. "We cannot have paramedics tramping through here right now. It will ruin the optic." "Is he dying?" Courtney asked, her voice flat. "Or is he just being dramatic?" "Look at him, Tyrone. His color is fine." I lay there on the floor, looking up at my son and his wife discussing my potential death as a scheduling conflict. They were not scared, they were inconvenienced. "Just give him a glass of water," Tyrone said, turning back to the movers. "Keep working, guys. He is fine. He gets confused and thinks he is sick sometimes. It is a cry for attention." I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow breath. The pain in my chest was gone, but a new pain, a colder, sharper pain, had taken its place. I had my answer. They would let me die on this floor if it meant closing a deal. I stood up slowly, dusting off my pants. The act was over. "I am fine," I said, my voice hard. "I do not need your water." I walked past them and climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. It was sweltering hot up there and smelled of dust and dead wasps. I sat on the cot they had thrown in the corner and listened to them laughing downstairs. I needed air. I needed to think. I waited until evening when I heard the television blaring in the living room and slipped out the back door again, using the new key Courtney had tossed at me. I walked to the back fence where the yard met the alleyway. The rain had stopped and the air was thick with humidity. I leaned against the chain-link fence, gripping the metal until my knuckles turned white. "Psst, Mr. Jeffers." The whisper came from the shadows of the large oak tree in the neighbor's yard. I didn't jump. I knew who it was. "Kofi," I said softly. "Is the coast clear?" A lanky young man in a hoodie stepped out from behind the trunk. Kofi was 19, a genius with coding and electronics. He was studying at the State University on a scholarship I had anonymously funded. He was the son I wished I had. "Yeah, they are watching a movie," Kofi whispered, glancing at my house. "I saw the movers today. They put your stuff in the attic, Mr. Jeffers. That is messed up." "It is temporary, Kofi," I said. "Whatever they think they are doing, it is temporary. Do you have it?" Kofi reached into the front pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a phone. It was not a smartphone. It was an old, heavy, rectangular device. A burner phone. A brick. The kind that couldn't be tracked. The kind that didn't have apps to spy on you. "Battery is fully charged," Kofi said, passing it through the gap in the fence. "I loaded the secure app I wrote for you. It connects directly to the cameras we installed inside, the smoke detectors and the motion sensors. It uses the neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi, so it won't show up on your home network bill. Press the number 1 to cycle through the video feeds. Press number 2 to record audio. The cloud storage is encrypted. Only you have the key." I took the phone. It felt heavy and solid in my hand, like a weapon. "Thank you, son," I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a roll of cash. I had taped to my ankle underneath my sock. It was $1,000. "No, Mr. Jeffers," Kofi said, backing away. "You paid for my books this semester. You fixed my mom's car for free. I am not taking your money." "Take it," I insisted, pushing the money through the fence. "This is a business transaction. You are my security consultant now, and besides, I need you to buy something else for me. I need a GPS tracker, the smallest one you can find." Kofi's eyes widened, but he took the money. "You going to put it on his car?" "I am going to put it on everything," I said grimly. "Go now, before they see you," Kofi nodded and disappeared back into the shadows. I slipped the brick phone into my waistband and pulled my shirt over it. I looked back at my house. The light from the master bedroom, my bedroom, was shining brightly. I could see Tyrone's silhouette pacing back and forth, talking on his headset, playing the big shot. "Enjoy the view while you can, son," I whispered to the darkness, "because the landlord is home and rent is due." The crash of a porcelain bowl shattering against the wall woke me from a light doze on the cot in the attic. It was not a clumsy accident. It was the sound of rage, pure and unfiltered. I sat up, my joints popping in the humid heat of the cramped space, checking the time on the brick phone Kofi had given me. It was barely 7 in the morning. I heard heavy footsteps stomping up the narrow stairs, followed by the door being kicked open. Tyrone stood there, his eyes bloodshot, his expensive suit shirt wrinkled and stained with sweat. He looked like a man who had been hunting all night and found nothing but his own shadow. "Where is it, Dad?" Tyrone barked, marching across the room. He grabbed the collar of my undershirt and hauled me to my feet. The cot screeched against the floorboards. "Where is what, son?" I asked, letting my body go limp, playing the part of the frail, confused old man. "The cash!" Tyrone screamed, shaking me. "The cash Mom kept in the house. We tore apart the kitchen. We ripped up the floorboards in the closet. There is nothing, not a single dollar. Where did she hide it?" "Etta did not hide money, Tyrone," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. "We put everything in the bank like normal folks. We lived on my pension. You know that." "Liar." Tyrone shoved me back onto the cot, hard. I hit my head against the sloped ceiling and saw stars. "You old school folks do not trust banks. You always have a stash, a coffee can, a hollowed out book. Courtney said she saw Mom counting bills last Christmas. Where is it?" He began to tear the attic apart. He overturned the cardboard box, containing my few remaining clothes. He kicked my shoes across the room. He even picked up the small bedside lamp and shook it, listening for the rattle of coins or the rustle of paper. There was no money. Etta and I did not keep cash in the house precisely because we knew our son. We knew he would come sniffing around eventually, like a shark sensing blood in the water. "Stop it, Tyrone," I pleaded, holding up my hands. "Please, you are scaring me. There is no money. We are not rich." Tyrone stopped breathing heavily. He looked at me with such contempt it felt like a physical blow. He stepped closer, looming over me. "Empty your pockets," he ordered. I stood up slowly and turned out the pockets of my trousers. A linty handkerchief, a few breath mints, and the 2 quarters I had found on the floor yesterday. "Pathetic," Tyrone spat. He snatched the quarters from my hand and threw them at the wall. He then proceeded to pat me down, his hands rough and invasive, checking my waistband, my socks even, feeling the hem of my shirt. He was searching his own father like a criminal booking a suspect. Nothing. He stepped back, running a hand over his shaved head, frustration radiating off him in waves. "You are useless, Dad. You are absolutely useless." He turned and stormed out of the attic, shouting for Courtney. I sank back onto the cot, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was desperate, more desperate than I had realized. A man does not shake down his elderly father for loose change unless he is on the brink of something terrible. An hour later, Courtney appeared at the attic door. She was holding a tray with a piece of dry toast and a glass of water. The prison rations continued. But under her arm, she carried a blue folder. She was smiling that tight, predatory smile she used when she wanted something. "Good morning, Malachi," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "Sorry about Tyrone earlier. He is just so stressed with the grief. He wants to make sure you are taken care of properly." She set the tray on a dusty trunk and opened the folder. She pulled out a thick document stapled at the top and a sleek black pen. "We need you to sign something, Malachi. It is just a formality. Since you are having trouble remembering things and getting around, Tyrone needs legal authority to handle your bills and talk to the insurance company. It is called a power of attorney. It just lets us help you." I looked at the document. I knew exactly what it was. It was a durable power of attorney granting Tyrone Jeffers full, uncontrolled access to every asset, account, and property in my name. It was the key to the kingdom, or so they thought. "I do not know, Courtney," I said, rubbing my eyes. "I should probably have Mr. Wainwright look at this. He did our wills." Courtney's smile faltered for a second. "Mr. Wainwright is expensive, Malachi, and you do not have any money right now. Besides, this needs to be done today so we can pay the electric bill. Do you want the lights to go out? Do you want to sit up here in the dark?" She held out the pen, clicking it open. "Trust us, Malachi. We are family." I reached out my hand, shaking violently. I took the pen, holding it awkwardly like a child learning to write. I squinted at the paper. "Where do I sign?" I asked. "Right there at the bottom." Courtney pointed a manicured finger at the line. "Sign your full name." I leaned over the paper, the pen hovering. I pressed the tip down and began to scrawl. I made the M a jagged mountain range. The A was a flat line. I skipped letters, added loops that did not exist. By the time I finished, it looked like a spider had dipped its legs in ink and died on the page. "There," I said, handing the pen back. "Is that good?" Courtney snatched the paper and looked at it. She frowned but then shrugged. It will have to do. Good job, Malachi. Now eat your toast. She turned and hurried downstairs, clutching the paper like a winning lottery ticket. I waited 10 seconds, then reached under the mattress of the cot and pulled out the brick phone. I pressed a single button, sending a pre-programmed signal to a secure server. The command was simple but devastating. It triggered a clause in the blind trust that managed the monthly stipend Tyrone received. The stipend, he thought, was a corporate retention bonus from his company, the stipend that actually came from me. The clause stated that, upon any attempt to seize legal control of my assets by a beneficiary, all discretionary distributions were to be immediately suspended, pending a fraud investigation. I sat back and waited, munching on the dry toast. It needed butter, but victory tasted rich enough. Downstairs, the house was quiet for about 20 minutes. Then I heard it, the distinct ping of a notification on Tyrone's phone, followed by a silence that stretched tight like a rubber band. "What?" Tyrone's scream tore through the floorboards. It was a sound of pure primal terror. I grabbed the brick phone and opened the camera app, switching the feed to the living room camera hidden inside the motion sensor. On the small, grainy screen, I saw Tyrone staring at his smartphone, his face draining of color. He was trembling. Courtney ran into the room, holding the signed power of attorney. "What is it, baby? Did the transfer go through?" she asked. "It is gone," Tyrone whispered, horror in his eyes. "The account, the bonus account, it says, frozen, suspected fraudulent activity, contact administrator." "What?" Courtney dropped the papers. "Use the other card, the platinum one." "Declined," Tyrone yelled, throwing his phone onto the sofa. "I just tried to buy gas. Declined. I tried to pay the caterer. Declined. Everything is locked, Courtney. The $5,000 that hits today, it is not there. It is all gone." "But we have the power of attorney," Courtney said, picking up his phone and staring at the screen. "We can go to the bank and force them to open it." "You do not understand." Tyrone paced the room, pulling at his collar. "This is not the bank. This is the trust fund, the one the company set up. They must have flagged my credit when you maxed out the cards for the party. They cut me off." "Courtney, I have zero balance. Zero." I watched on the small screen as the reality of their situation crashed down on them. They had spent money they did not have, banking on a refill that was never coming. And now they were standing in a house they could not afford, with a party scheduled for tonight that they could not pay for. Tyrone grabbed a crystal vase from the coffee table, a piece Etta had loved, and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the fireplace, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. "It is him," Tyrone screamed, pointing at the ceiling, pointing right at me. "It is that old man. He is a curse. Ever since Etta died, everything has gone to hell. He is a black hole, Courtney. He is bad luck. He is just a senile old fool," Courtney hissed, stepping over the broken glass. "He does not have the power to do this. This is a glitch, Tyrone. We just need to fix it. Call the bank. Call your boss." "I cannot call my boss," Tyrone roared. His voice cracked with panic. "I cannot let them know I am broke. They think I am solvent. They think I am executive material. If they find out my accounts are frozen, they will audit me. And if they audit me," he did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. I knew what he had been doing. I knew about the petty embezzlement, the padded expense reports. I had been covering for him silently, filling the gaps so he would not get caught. But now the safety net was gone. Tyrone collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "We are dead," he moaned. "We are so dead." Courtney sat beside him, her face hard and calculating. "We are not dead. We still have the house. The market is hot, Tyrone. If we sell this place, we can clear the debts. We can get the cash. We just need to get him out. Get him out." Tyrone looked up, his eyes wild. "To where?" "Anywhere," Courtney said. "The county home, the shelter. I do not care. We sell the house, fast cash buyer. Then we take the money and leave." I watched them plotting my disposal, their panic turning into ruthlessness. But then Tyrone's phone rang. Again he looked at the screen, and his face went from pale to gray. He did not answer it. He let it ring. "Who is that?" Courtney asked. Tyrone stood up, walking away from her, walking toward the window, looking out into the street. "It is the guys," he whispered. "The guys." Courtney's voice dropped. You said you paid them. I was going to, Tyrone said, sweat beading on his forehead. With the bonus, with the money from the insurance policy that does not exist. I owe them, Courtney. I owe them big, and they do not take IOUs. He pressed the answer button and put the phone to his ear. His voice changed instantly, becoming obsequious and terrified. Hey, Sal. Yeah, I know. Listen, there has been a banking error, a glitch. Yeah, the funds are there. I just need 24 hours. No, please, Sal, do not come here. My father is sick. I have people over. Listen, I have a plan. We are liquidating an asset. A big asset. Real estate. Yeah, prime location. I can have the full amount plus interest by Monday. Just give me the weekend. Please. Sal, please. I watched my son beg for his life to a loan shark. I saw the terror in his eyes, the way his hand shook as he held the phone. This was not just about greed anymore. This was about survival. He had dug a hole so deep he could not see the sky, and now he was willing to bury me to fill it. He hung up the phone and leaned his forehead against the cool glass of the window. I heard him whisper to himself, I have to fix this. I have to fix this. Up in the attic, I closed the app and set the phone down. My hands were steady. My heart was cold. I had cut the cord. The baby was crying, but he was about to learn that no one was coming to pick him up. The house was not his asset. It was his trap, and he was already caught. The car ride to the facility was silent and suffocating, like a hearse carrying a living corpse. Courtney drove her knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Tyrone sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, avoiding my gaze in the rearview mirror. I sat in the back, sandwiched between a box of adult diapers and a plastic bag containing the few clothes they had deemed necessary for my new life. They had told me we were going for a drive to see a nice place, a community, a place where I would have friends. We pulled off the highway and drove past the strip malls and the abandoned factories into a part of the city the street sweepers forgot. The building loomed ahead of us, a gray concrete block stained with water damage and surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The sign out front had missing letters. It read, Shady Pines Care Center, but the C was gone, making it read, Our Center. There was no care here. I knew that the moment the automatic doors slid open. The smell hit me first. It was a thick physical wall of industrial bleach, trying and failing to mask the underlying scent of urine, boiled cabbage, and despair. It was the smell of a place where people came to wait for death. The floors were linoleum, scuffed and yellowed under the flickering fluorescent lights. In the corner of the lobby, a television blared a cartoon at maximum volume, while 3 elderly residents sat in wheelchairs, slumped over and drooling, completely ignored by the staff. Courtney marched up to the reception desk, her heels clicking loudly on the hard floor, looking out of place in her designer jeans and silk blouse. She rang the bell on the counter with impatient force. We are here to see Director Miller, she announced loudly. We have an appointment for an immediate placement admission. The check is in my hand. A woman in scrubs that looked like they had not been washed in a week looked up from her phone. She chewed gum loudly and pointed down the hall. 3rd door on the left. He is expecting you. Tyrone finally looked at me, giving me a weak pat on the shoulder. Come on, Dad. It is just a meeting. Let's just see what they have to offer. I shuffled along, playing the part of the confused old man, my feet dragging on the floor. But my eyes were sharp, recording everything I saw. Nurse handle a patient, roughly jerking his arm to get him back into a chair. I saw a tray of food left on the floor, where roaches scurried into the cracks. This was a warehouse for the unwanted, a dumping ground for the inconvenient. We entered the office of Director Miller, a small man with a stained tie and eyes that calculated value rather than humanity, sat behind a desk cluttered with files. He stood up and shook Tyrone's hand, not even looking at me. Mr. Jeffers, Mrs. Jeffers, welcome. I have the paperwork ready for the economy suite you requested. Courtney sat down and crossed her legs. Economy suite sounds lovely. Does that include the meal plan? It includes 2 meals a day, Miller said, leaning back. 3 meals is an extra $400 a month. Most of our residents at this price point do not have much of an appetite anyway, so it is a waste. 2 meals is fine, Courtney said quickly. He needs to lose a little weight anyway. What about the room? Is it private? Miller laughed, a dry, hacking sound. Private rooms are for our platinum members. The economy package is a quad. You share a room with 3 other gentlemen. It encourages socialization. 4 men in one room, I thought. 4 men dying together with no privacy, no dignity, and the medical care. Tyrone asked, his voice small. Is there a doctor? A doctor visits once a week, Miller said, shrugging. If there is an emergency, we call an ambulance. But that is billed separately, directly to the patient. We keep costs low by cutting out the frills. No physical therapy, no organized outings, just a bed, a roof, and basic hygiene. Basic hygiene, Courtney repeated, looking at the contract. That sounds perfect. He does not need outings. He gets confused if he leaves his room. Just keep him fed and make sure he does not wander off. We want the cheapest option that keeps us legally compliant. Miller nodded, taking a pen out of his pocket. That would be our bronze tier. It is strictly custodial. No television in the room, no personal phone line, shared bathroom at the end of the hall. It is $2,000 a month cash or certified check up front. I sat in the plastic chair in the corner, listening to my daughter-in-law haggle over the price of my existence. She was negotiating my life like she was buying a used car, trying to get the dealer to knock off a few $100s for scratches and dents. Can we waive the intake fee? Courtney asked. We are bringing him in today. We are saving you the trouble of marketing the empty bed. Miller pursed his lips, thinking, fine, waived. But you sign the liability waiver now. If he falls, if he gets sick, if he walks out the front door and gets hit by a bus, we are not liable. Where do I sign? Tyrone asked, reaching for the pen. Wait, Miller held up a hand. We need to process the payment first, and I need to get the room ready. The previous tenant just passed away this morning. Housekeeping is still turning the mattress. Why don't you leave Mr. Jeffers in the lobby for an hour? Let him get acclimated to the environment. See if he makes... Any friends? Courtney stood up, smiling. Great idea. We have some errands to run anyway. We will go get the cashier's check and come back in an hour to sign the final papers and drop him off. They both turned to me. Dad, you stay here, Tyrone said, avoiding my eyes again. Sit in the lobby, watch TV. We will be right back. Do not move. They walked out of the office, leaving me with the man who ran this prison. Miller looked at me with cold indifference. Go sit in the lobby, old man, Miller said, dismissing me. Do not make a mess. I walked out to the waiting area and found a seat away from the blaring television. I watched a woman in a wheelchair crying softly for her mother, who had probably been dead for 20 years. I watched a man shouting at a wall, arguing with a ghost. This was their plan. This was my future. A slow, rotting death in a place that smelled of bleach and apathy. They were going to leave me here today. They were going to drive away and never look back, using my own money to pay for my imprisonment. I waited until the receptionist was distracted by a delivery driver. Then I stood up and shuffled toward the restroom, located down the hall. I entered the stall and locked the door, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. I reached into my sock and pulled out the brick phone Kofi had given me. My hands were not shaking anymore. They were steady, with purpose. I dialed the number for Mr. Wainwright, my attorney, who had been waiting for my signal. It is time, I whispered into the phone when he answered. Initiate Operation Bait. Understood, Mr. Jeffers. Wainwright's voice was crisp and professional. The line is baited. The call will be made in 2 minutes. Are you safe? I am in hell, I said, but I am coming out, and I am bringing the fire with me. I hung up and hid the phone again. I flushed the toilet for effect and walked back out to the lobby, sitting down in the same plastic chair, merging back into the scenery of the discarded. Outside in the parking lot, Tyrone and Courtney were sitting in my truck arguing. Courtney was screaming about the cost. Even $2,000 was too much for her. She wanted to find a state-run facility that was free. Tyrone was trying to start the engine, his hand jamming the key into the ignition with frustration. Suddenly, Tyrone's cell phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was an unknown number, a local area code. Answer it, Courtney snapped. It might be the loan shark. Tyrone answered, his voice trembling. Hello? Is this Mr. Tyrone Jeffers? The voice on the other end was deep, smooth, and dripped with money. Yes. Who is this? My name is Alexander Sterling. I represent a private investment group based in Dubai. We are looking to acquire heritage properties in your neighborhood for a revitalization project. I understand your father, Malachi Jeffers, owns the property at 424 Oak Street. Tyrone's eyes went wide. He put the phone on speaker. Yes, that is my father's house. I handle his affairs. Excellent. Mr. Sterling said. "We are moving quickly, Mr. Jeffers. We have a brief the window to acquire the assets for our portfolio. We have scouted the location, and we are prepared to make a cash offer sight unseen. We are offering $1.5 million for the property, provided we can close the deal within 48 hours. $1.5 million, Courtney gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Her eyes lit up with a greed so intense it looked like madness. Tyrone swallowed hard. $1.5 million? Yes, we are interested. Very interested. Wonderful, Sterling continued. However, our legal team requires the owner's signature on the preliminary deed of sale. Since the title is in your father's name, he must be present to sign. We can meet you at your residence in 1 hour with the paperwork and a $10,000 cash deposit to secure the contract. Tyrone looked at the grim facade of the nursing home, then at Courtney. The realization hit them both at the same time. They had just dumped the owner of a $1.5 million asset into a hole where he might be, declared incompetent or medically unable to sign within hours. If they left me here, they lost the deal. If they left me here, they lost the money. We have a problem, Tyrone said into the phone. My father is unavailable at the moment, Mr. Jeffers. Sterling's voice hardened. We do not do business with unavailable parties. If the owner cannot sign today, we will move to the next property on our list. Good day. Wait, Tyrone screamed. No, he is available. He is with us right now. We are just taking him out for lunch. We will be there. In 1 hour, meet us at the house. Very well. 1 hour, Mr. Jeffers. Do not be late. The line went dead. Tyrone looked at Courtney, sweat pouring down his face. Go get him, Courtney shrieked. Get him out of there right now. We need him, Tyrone. We need him to sign that paper. Tyrone scrambled out of the truck and ran back toward the sliding doors of the nursing home. I watched him through the glass, watched him running toward me with a look of desperate panic. He burst into the lobby ignoring the receptionist and ran straight to my chair. Dad, he panted, grabbing my arm. Come on, we are leaving. Leaving? I asked, blinking slowly, looking up at him with innocent confusion. But I thought I lived here now, the man said. I have a bed. Change of plans, Dad, Tyrone said, hauling me to my feet, his grip bruising my arm. This place isn't good enough for you. We couldn't leave you here. We love you too much. We are taking you home. He dragged me toward the door, past the crying woman and the shouting man. I stumbled, letting him support my weight, allowing him to lead me back to the slaughter. But as we walked out into the humid afternoon air, I allowed myself a small, internal smile. They were taking me back to the house, back to the cameras, back to Kofi, and back to the trap I had just set. They thought they were rescuing their fortune. They had no idea they were driving the getaway car for their own executioner. The drive back to the house was a masterclass in gaslighting, as Tyrone kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes wide with a frantic sort of hope, trying to erase the last hour of my life with chatter. He talked about the weather, about the traffic, about how much better I looked now that I had gotten some fresh air, disregarding the fact that the fresh air had been in the parking lot of a human warehouse. Courtney sat rigidly in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, probably trying to find a way to explain to the loan sharks why they had to wait another 48 hours. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same, but it felt different. It was no longer a home. It was a staging area for a heist. Tyrone ushered me inside with a gentle hand on my back, a stark contrast to the bruising grip he had used to drag me out of the nursing home. Dad, why don't you go wash up? Tyrone said, his voice trembling with forced cheerfulness. Courtney and I are going to make dinner, a real dinner, steaks. We found those T-bones Mom had in the freezer. We are going to celebrate? Celebrate? I asked, looking at him with the vacant eyes I had perfected over the last 48 hours. Celebrate what? Celebrate us, Tyrone said, squeezing my shoulder. Celebrate family. We are not going to put you in that place, Dad. We realize we made a mistake. We want you to be happy. We want you to have the best. And this deal with Mr. Sterling, it is the answer. It is the golden ticket. I went upstairs to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. The man looking back at me was tired, but his eyes were hard like flint. They were going to cook Etta's anniversary steaks, the steaks she had bought 2 months ago and saved for our 45th year. They were going to grill my memories and serve them to me on a platter of betrayal. I came back downstairs to the smell of searing meat and garlic. It smelled delicious, which made my stomach turn. Tyrone had set the dining room table with the good china, the plates Etta only used for Christmas. He poured me a glass of iced tea and pulled out my chair. "Sit, Dad, sit," Tyrone said, bustling around the kitchen like a short-order cook. "Look at this, a feast for a king." We ate in a tense silence, broken only by the scraping of silverware. Courtney pushed her meat around her plate, her eyes darting to the clock on the wall. She was vibrating with anxiety. "So, Dad," Tyrone said, finally wiping his mouth with a napkin, "about Mr. Sterling. He seems like a very serious man, a man with resources. $1.5 million is a lot of money, Dad." "It is life-changing. It is a lot," I agreed, chewing slowly. "It is more than I paid for this house." "Exactly." Tyrone leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Think about what you could do with that. You could go to a real retirement community, the kind with golf courses and swimming pools. You could have a private nurse. You could travel. You deserve that, Dad. You worked hard your whole life." I looked at him, the sweat beading on his upper lip, the desperation in his eyes. He did not care about my hard work. He cared about the $100,000 he owed Sal and the lifestyle he could not maintain. "But I promised your mother I would never sell," I said, my voice soft. "I told her I would die in this house. Mom is gone, Dad." Courtney snapped, then caught herself softening her tone. "Mom is gone, Malachi. She would not want you to be here alone, struggling with the stairs and the maintenance. She would want you to be safe. And frankly, this house is a burden. It is rotting around you. The roof needs work. The plumbing is old. If you do not sell now, you might never get another offer like this." Tyrone nodded vigorously. "She is right, Dad. This is a miracle. 1.5 million cash. We can put it in a trust for you. We can manage it so you never have to worry about a bill again. Manage it, like you managed your own bank account, I thought. Like you managed to get cut off from the allowance I secretly gave you." "I do not know," I said, putting my fork down. "I am tired, Tyrone. I just want to rest." "You can rest," Tyrone said, his voice rising in panic. "You can rest forever once we sign the papers. Dad, please, do this for us. Do this for yourself. Mr. Sterling is coming tomorrow. We need to be ready." I looked at them both, the predator and the parasite, waiting for the host to give up. I let the silence stretch until I could hear their breathing hitch. "Okay," I said. Tyrone exhaled a sound like a tire deflating. "Okay. Okay, good. That is great, Dad." But I raised a finger silencing his celebration. "I have conditions." "Conditions?" Courtney narrowed her eyes. "What conditions?" "First," I said, leaning back in my chair, "I do not trust banks anymore. Not after what happened to your account, Tyrone. You said they froze your money just like that. If I sell this house, I want the deposit. The $10,000 Mr. Sterling mentioned. I want it in cash, in my hand. Before I sign anything. Cash." Tyrone blinked. "Sure, Dad. Cash is fine. 10,000 is easy. We can do that." "Second," I continued, "I want to sign the papers at your office party tomorrow night." Tyrone froze. "The party." Courtney looked at him confused. "Why the party, Malachi?" she asked. "Because I said my voice, taking on a stubborn edge. I want to see where my son works. I want to meet his boss. I want everyone to see that Tyrone Jeffers is a man who closes million-dollar deals. I want to be proud of you, son. I want to show you off one last time before I go away to the home." Tyrone looked conflicted. He was ashamed of me. He had spent years keeping his blue-collar father away from his white-collar world. But his vanity was a powerful drug, and the idea of looking like a power broker closing a real estate deal in front of his colleagues was tempting. "I do not know, Dad," Tyrone muttered. "It is a corporate event. It is black tie. I have a suit," I said. "It is old, but it is clean. Let me do this, son. Let me have this one moment." Tyrone looked at Courtney. She shrugged, a tiny movement that said, "Just give him what he wants so we can get the money." "Fine," Tyrone said, a smile creeping onto his face. "Fine, Dad. You can come. You can sign the papers there. It will be a big moment, a passing of the torch." "Good," I said. "Good. Then it is settled." I stood up to clear my plate, but as I did, my elbow knocked over the glass of iced tea. The dark liquid spread across the white tablecloth, dripping onto the floor. "Oh, for God's sake," Courtney hissed, jumping up. "You are so clumsy, Malachi. Look at this mess." "I am sorry," I stammered, grabbing a napkin. "I will clean it up." "No, sit down," Courtney snapped, grabbing the tablecloth and bunching it up. "Go into the living room. Just get out of the way." I shuffled into the living room, my head down, pretending to be cowed. I sat in my recliner, the leather worn smooth by years of reading the evening paper. Courtney and Tyrone were in the kitchen, arguing in hushed whispers about the stain and the party. I looked over at the fireplace mantel, where Etta used to keep her collection of porcelain angels. They were gone, probably packed in a box or thrown away. But on the mantel, sitting alone, was a small black notebook. It was mine. I had left it there days ago, before the chaos started. It was a simple moleskin notebook filled with numbers and letters, random strings of characters that looked like gibberish to the untrained eye. But to me, they were the keys to the kingdom. It was the seed phrase to a cold storage Bitcoin wallet, containing a significant portion of my wealth, accumulated over a decade of early investing, guided by Kofi. Courtney walked into the living room holding a trash bag. She saw me looking at the notebook, and her eyes followed my gaze. She walked over and picked it up, flipping through the pages. "What is this?" she asked, looking at the scribbles. "Is this another one of your senile lists, Malachi? Are these codes for the television?" "Give me that," I shouted, jumping out of the chair with a speed that surprised her. "That is mine. That is private." Courtney stepped back, holding the book out of my reach. She looked at the pages again, her lip curling. "These are just random letters. You are losing it, old man. You are writing nonsense." "It is not nonsense," I yelled, reaching for it. "It is my money. The boy at the computer store said it was digital gold. He said if I kept those codes I would be rich. It is my retirement. Courtney, give it to me." Courtney's eyes widened. She looked from the book to me, and a cruel realization dawned on her face. She thought I was delusional. She thought I had been scammed into buying fake internet money, or that I was simply writing down gibberish, believing it was valuable. "Rich," she laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Digital gold, Malachi. This is ink on paper. You do not even know how to use email. You think this is money? This is trash, just like everything else in this house." She walked over to the fireplace. The gas logs were not lit, but she grabbed a long match from the holder on the wall and struck it against the brick. The flame flared up orange and bright. "No!" I screamed, lunging forward. "Do not! It is worth millions." "Millions," Courtney scoffed. "You have nothing, Malachi. You have a rotting house and a head full of fairy tales. You want to rely on this? You want to think this is going to save you?" She held the corner of the notebook to the flame. The paper caught instantly, curling and blackening. She held it until the flames licked at her fingers. Then she tossed the burning book into the fireplace. "There," she said, dusting off her hands. "Now the house is all you have. Now you have to sell." I fell to my knees in front of the fireplace, watching the paper burn, watching the codes turn to ash. I let out a wail of despair, a sound of pure, broken heartbreak. It was the best acting performance of my life. "You burned it," I sobbed, rocking back and forth. "You burned my fortune. You burned everything." Tyrone ran into the room, drawn by the screaming. "What happened? What is going on?" "She burned my money," I cried, pointing at the ashes. "She burned my Bitcoin." Tyrone looked at the fireplace, then at Courtney. She rolled her eyes. "He thinks that notebook was full of digital money," she said. "It was just scribbles, Tyrone. He is gone, completely gone. He thought he was a millionaire." Tyrone looked at me, huddled on the floor, weeping over a pile of ash, and his shoulders relaxed. The tension left his body. He believed it. He believed I was a senile old fool chasing fantasies. "It is okay, Dad," Tyrone said, his voice thick with condescending pity. "It is okay. The house money is real. We do not need magic internet money. We have the deal with Mr. Sterling. Get up, Dad. You are embarrassing yourself." I let him help me up, my legs shaking. I looked at him, my eyes wet with fake tears. "I just wanted to leave you something, son," I whispered. "I just wanted to be a good father." "You are a good father, Dad," Tyrone said, patting my arm. "Now go to sleep. We have a big day tomorrow. We have to get you a suit." I nodded, wiping my eyes and shuffling toward the stairs. I looked back once at the fireplace, at the ashes of the notebook. They did not know that the notebook was a decoy. The real seed phrase was engraved on a steel plate, bolted to the underside of my truck bed, inside the chassis. They had burned a copy, a prop. I climbed the stairs to the attic, listening to them laugh downstairs, listening to them toast their victory. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had cornered the rat. But as I lay down on the cot in the darkness, I smiled. A cold, hard smile. They wanted to see a show. They wanted to parade me around their corporate party like a trophy. Fine, I would give them a show. I would give them a performance they would never forget. I pulled out the brick phone and sent a single text message to Mr. Wainwright. The trap is set. Meet me at the gala. Bring the paperwork, and bring the hammer. Tomorrow night. Tyrone Jeffers was going to learn what it really meant to be a big shot. He was going to learn that the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And I was going to be the one to push him. The transformation of my home was a desecration that happened in less than 6 hours. Courtney had hired a staging crew to turn the cozy living room I had built with my own hands into a sterile showroom of rented furniture and fake art. They covered Etta's floral wallpaper with white sheets. They hid my recliner in the garage, and they set up a bar right where the family Christmas tree used to stand. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and desperation. I stood in the kitchen wearing a pair of black trousers that were too short and a white shirt that had yellowed with age. It was a costume chosen by Courtney. She had taken my good suit, the one I wore to church, and locked it away, telling me I needed to look the part of the help, not the host. Here, she said, shoving a silver tray of champagne flutes into my hands. Hold this. And for God's sake, Malachi, do not talk to anyone. Just offer the drinks and keep moving. If anyone asks, you are the handyman helping out for the night. Do not embarrass Tyrone. He has the regional vice president coming tonight. I looked at her at the diamonds, glittering on her neck, diamonds she had bought with a credit card she had opened in my name, and I felt a cold calm settle over me. I took the tray. My hands were steady. I went out into the living room, which was now filled with people. The noise was deafening. A cacophony of fake laughter and clinking glass. Tyrone stood in the center of the room, holding court. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, a suit I knew cost more than my first car. He was laughing loudly, his arm around a tall man with gray hair. "This is the place, sir," Tyrone was saying, gesturing around my home. "We are renovating, of course, bringing it up to modern standards. But the bones are good." The gray-haired man nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "Charming, rustic. It has character." "And who is this?" He pointed at me as I approached with the tray. Tyrone froze for a second. His eyes darted to his boss, then to me, shame burning in his gaze. "Oh, that is just Malachi," Tyrone said, his voice dismissive. "He does the gardening and fixes the leaks. We let him stay on to help out. He is a bit slow, but he is harmless." The gardening. The man who taught him to read blueprints. The man who showed him how to tie a tie. The man who held him when he cried over his first heartbreak. I was just the gardener. I stopped in front of them, offering the tray. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, my voice low and rough. "Would you like a drink?" The boss took a glass without looking at me. "Thank you, Tyrone. You are a saint for employing the elderly. It is good corporate responsibility." I walked away, the sound of their laughter following me like a whip. I wove through the crowd, offering drinks to people who looked through me as if I were furniture. I heard snippets of conversation, bragging about bonuses, complaints about second homes, gossip about coworkers. They were peacocks strutting in a barnyard, terrified of getting mud on their feathers. In the corner, near the stereo system, stood a young man in a black hoodie, adjusting the soundboard. It was Kofi. He looked up and caught my eye, giving me a barely perceptible nod. He had hacked the audio system hours ago. The music was playing, but he had also set up a directional microphone feed that went straight to the earpiece I had hidden in my left ear. I moved toward a group of 3 men standing near the window. They were discussing the upcoming merger between Tyrone's company and a larger competitor, a deal that was supposed to be secret, a deal that I knew about because I owned a significant block of shares in the acquiring firm through a shell company. I stepped into their circle, extending the tray. "Champagne?" I asked. One of them, a heavy-set man with a red face, waved me away. "No, we are fine." I leaned in closer, invading his personal space just enough to be uncomfortable. "Are you sure, Mr. Henderson?" I whispered, my voice dropping an octave. You might need a drink to settle your nerves when the auditors find the discrepancies in the pension fund. Henderson dropped his glass. It shattered, on the floor, spraying champagne over his polished shoes. "What did you say?" he sputtered, staring at me. "I did not say anything, sir," I said, straightening up and resuming my role as the confused old man. "Let me get a towel for that mess." I walked away, leaving him pale and shaking, whispering furiously to his colleagues. I moved to the next group. Two women were talking about the CEO, complaining about his leadership style. One of them was the CFO of Tyrone's division. "More napkins, ma'am?" I asked, holding out a small stack. She took them without looking. "Thanks." I leaned in, pretending to pick up an empty glass. "Is it true what they say about the patent infringement lawsuit on the XT900 prototype?" I whispered. "It would be a shame if the board found out the design was stolen from a Japanese subsidiary before the quarterly meeting." The CFO froze. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. "Who are you?" she hissed. "Just the help, ma'am," I mumbled, moving away quickly. "Just picking up the trash." I worked the room like a ghost. For the next hour, I planted landmines in every conversation. I whispered about hidden debts, about secret affairs, about looming layoffs. I knew their secrets because I had been researching this company for 20 years, ever since Tyrone started working there. I knew where the bodies were buried, because in some cases I had helped dig the holes to protect my son's career from a distance. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The laughter died down, replaced by nervous whispers. People were looking around suspiciously, wondering who had leaked information, wondering if they were being recorded, wondering why the old man in the dirty shirt knew about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. Tyrone noticed the change. He saw his guests looking uncomfortable, saw them checking their phones and whispering. He rushed over to me, grabbing my arm and dragging me into the kitchen. "What are you doing, Dad?" he hissed, his face inches from mine. "People are acting weird. Henderson looks like he is about to have a stroke. Did you say something to him?" I pulled my arm free. "I offered him a drink, son," I said innocently. "Maybe he does not like cheap champagne." "It is not cheap," Tyrone snapped. "This is $1,000 a bottle vintage. Courtney ordered it special." I looked at the bottles lined up on the counter. They were indeed expensive labels, vintage Dom Perignon. But I knew something Tyrone did not. I reached out and picked up one of the bottles, running my thumb over the label. "It feels lighter than it should," I said. "What are you talking about?" Tyrone asked, grabbing the bottle from me. "I am talking about authenticity, Tyrone," I said, my voice losing the tremor, dropping the act for just a second. "Real champagne has a specific weight. This glass is too thin. And the label, look at the glue. It is peeling at the corner." Tyrone looked at the bottle, then at me, confusion warring with anger. "So what?" So I said, leaning against the counter. "Your wife paid $5,000 for a case of sugar water and carbonation. This is counterfeit, Tyrone. It is fake, just like everything else in this house tonight." Tyrone stared at the bottle. "Does it matter?" he asked, his voice rising. "If they drink it and think it is real, does it matter?" "It matters if you paid for the real thing," I said. "But you didn't pay, did you?" "Courtney did." "With the black card?" Tyrone looked relieved. "Yeah, the black card. Her family's card. The one with the unlimited limit. She said she wanted to treat us." I laughed. A low, dry sound devoid of humor. "Son, you are a project manager. You deal with logistics. Have you ever seen the bill for that card?" "No," Tyrone said, defensive. "She handles the finances for the household. She says it is better that way." I reached into the back pocket of my trousers and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of thermal paper. It was a receipt I had fished out of the trash earlier that day, when Courtney thought I was napping. "Take a look at this," I said, handing it to him. Tyrone took the receipt. It was from the liquor store where the wine was purchased. It showed the transaction for the wine $5,000. But at the bottom, it did not say Amex Centurion. It said Visa Debit Prepaid. Tyrone looked up at me, his brow furrowed. "Prepaid? What does that mean?" "It means that is not a credit card, Tyrone. It is a reloadable debit card, the kind you buy at a grocery store, the kind drug dealers and scammers use to move money around without a paper trail." So Tyrone asked. He was not getting it. He was so desperate to believe in the fantasy, he could not see the math. "So where did the $5,000 come from, son?" I asked gently. "If she does not have a credit line and you are broke, Where did she get $5,000 cash to load onto a burner card? Tyrone's face went slack. The gears were finally turning. He looked at the receipt, then at the door to the living room where Courtney was laughing with the wives of his bosses, playing the part of the wealthy hostess. She told me her parents wire her money, Tyrone whispered. She said it is an allowance. Her parents are mail carriers in Ohio. Tyrone the First said, they live in a 2-bedroom ranch and drive a Honda. They do not have $5,000 to spend on wine. She stole it. Tyrone stole it. From who? From you, I said. And when you ran out from me, she pawned your mother's jewelry, Tyrone. The necklace Etta wore on our wedding day, the pearl earrings, the diamond tennis bracelet I gave her for her 50th birthday. She sold them all to a pawn shop on 4th Street yesterday morning. That is where the cash came from. She is not rich, son. She is a parasite. And she has been feeding on us for years. Tyrone looked like he was going to be sick. He leaned against the counter, breathing hard. No, he said, shaking his head. No, she wouldn't. She loves me. She loves the lifestyle. I corrected. She loves the idea of you. But right now, looking at this receipt, I think she loves money more than anything else. And guess what, Tyrone? The wine is fake. The card is fake. And in about 10 minutes when I go out there and pour a glass of this vinegar for your boss, his opinion of you is going to be fake too, because he is going to know you served him swill at a black tie event. Tyrone grabbed the bottle and looked at the label again, peeling back the corner. It came away easily, revealing a cheaper label underneath. Oh my God, he whispered. She scammed me. I straightened my shirt, buttoning the collar. I am going back out there, son. I have a job to do. I have to serve the guests. But you have a decision to make. You can keep pretending, or you can ask your wife what else she has been lying about. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there in the harsh fluorescent light, holding a bottle of fake champagne and the receipt that proved his life was a lie. The party was just getting started. The music was louder now, and the guests were drunker, but the tension in the room was palpable. The seeds of doubt I had planted were sprouting. Eyes were darting. Conversations were hushed. I saw Mr. Wainwright enter the room. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him better than anyone else's. He stood by the door, holding a leather briefcase. He saw me and nodded. It was time. I walked over to the buffet table and picked up a silver spoon. I tapped it against a crystal glass, the sound ringing out clear and sharp, cutting through the chatter. Attention, everyone, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. Attention, please. The room went silent. Faces turned toward me, confused, annoyed, amused. The gardener wants to make a toast, someone chuckled. I looked at Tyrone, standing in the kitchen doorway, pale and sweating. I looked at Courtney, freezing with a canapé halfway to her mouth. I am not the gardener, I said, dropping the accent, dropping the stoop, dropping the act. My name is Malachi Jeffers, and I have a few things to say about the future of this company. The room gasped, and I smiled, because the devil was about to get his due. I stood in the hallway just outside the swinging door of the kitchen adjusting the cuff of my ill-fitting shirt, while the earpiece in my left ear buzzed with the static of a marriage disintegrating. Kofi had done his job well. The audio feed was crystal clear, transmitting every venomous whisper from the other side of the door. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes and listening to the sound of my son, realizing he had married a monster. You lied to me. Tyrone's voice was a low growl, shaking with a mixture of rage and humiliation. You told me your parents were investors. You told me that card had a $500,000 limit. You let me parade around here serving $5 swill to the regional vice president, thinking I was the man. Do you know what Henderson is going to do on Monday? He is going to audit my expense reports, Courtney, because he knows if I am fake about the wine, I am fake about the numbers. I heard the sound of a hand slamming against the granite countertop. Shut up, Tyrone, Courtney hissed back, her voice devoid of the sweet syrup she used in public. You want to talk about lies? You told me you were an executive. You told me you had a trust fund coming when your mother died. You are a mid-level project manager with a gambling problem, and a leased BMW that is 2 months behind on payments. Do not stand there and act like you are the victim. I flinched. The gambling, that was new. I knew he wasted money on clothes and cars, but gambling explained the desperation. It explained the loan sharks. I did that for us, Tyrone pleaded, his anger crumbling into whining. I was trying to build a life. You spent $50,000 on a wedding we could not afford. You maxed out the credit cards I opened in my dad's name. Where did that money go? Courtney. It certainly did not go to the wine. It went to interest payments, you idiot. Courtney spat. It went to keeping the wolves away from the door because you cannot manage a budget to save your life. And yes, I pawned the jewelry. I pawned it because I needed to look the part of a successful wife. While you played pretend in your cubicle. We are drowning, Tyrone. We are $300,000 in the hole. And that old man out there is the only life raft we have left. $300,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. My wife and I had saved for 40 years to build our wealth. We scraped and sacrificed, and these two had burned through a fortune in imaginary money before they even had it. So you scam me, Tyrone's voice broke. You scam me with a fake card and fake money. What happens when the bill for the caterer comes tonight, huh? What happens when they realize the check is going to bounce? We sell the house, Courtney said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. We sell the house tomorrow. Mr. Sterling brings the cash. We pay off the caterer. We pay off Sal. We pay off the credit cards. And then we put your father in the cheapest hole we can find, and we forget he ever existed. He won't sign, Tyrone whispered. He is stubborn. He wants the cash in hand. He wants to show off. He is going to ruin it, Courtney. He is going to say something stupid to Sterling, or he is going to realize what we are doing. Then we make sure he cannot say anything, Courtney said. There was a silence on the line, a heavy, pregnant pause that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. What do you mean? Tyrone asked. I mean, we stop asking, and we start making sure. Courtney walked across the kitchen. I could hear her heels clicking on the tile. I heard the rattle of a pill bottle. The prescription sleep aid you take, Tyrone. The strong stuff. The one the doctor said not to mix with alcohol. No, Tyrone said, his voice trembling. No, Courtney, that is dangerous. He has a weak heart, if we give him that. He does not have a weak heart. He faked that heart attack yesterday. I saw him eating a candy bar 10 minutes later. He is strong as an ox. That is the problem. He is too strong and too lucid. We need him pliable, Tyrone. We need him groggy and confused when Sterling comes tomorrow. We need him to sign that paper without reading the fine print. I listened to the sound of the bottle being opened, the rattle of pills being shaken out into a palm. How many? Tyrone asked, a note of defeat in his voice. 4, Courtney said. 4, Tyrone gasped. That will kill him, Courtney. That is a horse tranquilizer dose. It will not kill him. It will just knock him out. He will sleep for 12 hours, wake up confused, and sign whatever we put in front of him. Do you want to lose the house? Tyrone? Do you want Sal to come back and break your legs? Do you want to go to jail for embezzlement? I held my breath, waiting for my son to find his spine, waiting for him to say no. But all I heard was a long, shaky exhale. Do it, Tyrone whispered. Just do it fast. I heard the sound of a spoon crushing tablets against a saucer. The grinding noise was loud in my ear, a gritty rhythm of betrayal. Courtney was humming a soft tune as she worked, pulverizing the chemicals that were meant to enslave my mind. She was efficient, brutal, and completely without remorse. Get the milk she ordered. Warm it up. Old people love warm milk. It masks the bitterness. I heard the microwave beep. I heard the hum of the machine heating the liquid that was supposed to nurture me. My son was preparing a poison cocktail in the kitchen where his mother used to bake cookies. Here, Courtney said. Stir it in. Make sure it dissolves completely. I heard the clink of the spoon against the ceramic mug. Stir, 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 mixing my fate into a wholesome drink. He is going to know, Tyrone said, panic rising in his voice. He is going to taste it. Add some honey, Courtney said. Add cinnamon. Make it a treat. Tell him you are sorry for the party. Tell him you want him to sleep well, so he is fresh for the signing tomorrow. Play the good son, Tyrone. You are an actor, remember? Act 1. Moved away from the door, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. They had crossed the line. There was no going back from this. Theft was one thing, neglect was another, but this was active malice. This was a calculated assault on my body and mind. My son was not just a disappointment, he was a danger. I walked into the living room where the party was winding down. The guests were leaving, stumbling out the door with their fake wine and their gossip. I sat down in a folding chair near the back door, making sure I was visible, making sure I looked tired and frail. 5 minutes later, Tyrone emerged from the kitchen. He was holding a mug of steaming milk dust with cinnamon. He had fixed his tie and smoothed his hair. He put on a smile that was almost convincing, if you did not look at his eyes, which were dead and flat. "Hey, Dad," he said, crossing the room. "The party is over. You did good tonight, really good. Everyone was impressed." I looked up at him, playing the part. "I am glad, son. I just wanted to help." "I know," Tyrone said, kneeling beside my chair so he was at eye level. "I know I have been hard on you lately. Stress, you know. But I appreciate you, and I want you to get a good night's sleep before Mr. Sterling comes tomorrow." He held out the mug. The steam rose, carrying the scent of warm milk and sweet spice, and underneath it, the faint chemical tang of oblivion. "Here, I made this for you. Mom used to make it. Warm milk with honey and cinnamon. It will help you relax." I reached out and took the mug. My hands shook slightly, not from age, but from the sheer adrenaline coursing through my veins. The mug was warm, heavy. "Thank you, Tyrone," I said, looking him dead in the eye. I said, looking at the son who was trying to drug his own father into submission. "You are a good boy. You always look out for me." Tyrone flinched, looking away, guilt flickering across his face for a microsecond before greed stamped it out. "Drink up, Dad. Go to bed. We will handle the cleanup." I lifted the mug to my lips, blowing on the steam. I pretended to take a sip, letting the liquid touch my lips but not entering my mouth. "It is hot," I said, lowering the mug. "I will take it upstairs and drink it while I get ready for bed." "Okay," Tyrone stood up, eager to get me out of sight, eager for the drugs to take hold. "Just drink it all, okay? We need you rested." I stood up, clutching the poison chalice, and walked toward the stairs. I could feel his eyes boring into my back, waiting for me to fall. I climbed the stairs to the attic, my steps heavy and slow. When I got inside the room, I closed the door and locked it. I walked over to the single window that overlooked the backyard. I opened the latch and pushed it up, letting the cool night air rush in. Below me on the patio was a large potted fern. Etta had loved that fern. She had watered it every day, spoken to it like a pet. It was lush and green, vibrant with life. I looked at the mug in my hand. The milk looked innocent, creamy and sweet. I poured the contents out the window, watching the white liquid stream down and splash into the soil of the fern, drenching the roots. I waited. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. I watched as the leaves of the fern began to droop. The vibrant green turned a sickly yellow at the edges, then brown. The stems lost their turgidity, collapsing inward. The plant Etta had loved was dying before my eyes, reacting to the toxicity of the high-dose sedative soaking its roots. If I had drunk that, I would be in a coma or dead. My heart would have stopped. I turned away from the window, my face wet with tears. I was not crying for myself. I was crying for the little boy I used to hold. The little boy who used to bring me drawings from school. The little boy who is now a man, willing to kill me for a house. I reached under the cot and pulled out the brick phone. I typed a message to Mr. Wainwright, my fingers flying across the keypad. They tried to drug me. Evidence secured. Initiate final phase. Close the net. I hit send and watched the message status change to delivered. Tomorrow there would be no mercy. Tomorrow, I would not be a father. I would be a judge. And the sentence was going to be total ruin. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the dining room, casting long, pale shadows across the table that looked like prison bars. I sat slumped in my chair, my head lolling to the side, playing the part of the medicated invalid perfectly. Tyrone stood over me, his breath smelling of stale coffee and peppermint mouthwash, trying to mask the rot of his anxiety. Across the table sat a man they called Mr. Davis, the fake lawyer Courtney had dug up from whatever sewer she frequented. He wore a suit that was too shiny and a tie that was too wide, and he kept tapping a gold-plated pen against a stack of legal documents. "Dad." Tyrone hissed into my ear, his hand gripping my shoulder tight enough to bruise. "Dad, wake up. You have to focus." I let out a low groan and fluttered my eyelids, pretending to struggle against the fog of the drugs they thought I had ingested. "Where am I?" I mumbled, slurring my words intentionally. "Where is Etta?" "She is gone, Dad." Tyrone snapped his patience, evaporating like steam. "She is gone and you need to sign these papers so we can take care of him." "You look at me. He grabbed my chin and forced my head up. His eyes were bloodshot, wide, with a manic desperation. He looked like a man standing on a trap door, waiting for the lever to be pulled. Mr. Davis cleared his throat nervously. Is he cognizant enough to sign? This could be contested if he looks like a zombie. He is fine, Tyrone barked, letting go of my face. He is just groggy from his sleep meds. He knows what he is doing. Tell him, Dad. Tell him you want to sell. I paused, letting my head drop again. I want to go home. You are home, you old fool, Courtney shouted from the kitchen doorway. She was pacing back and forth, holding a dish towel, twisting it in her hands until her knuckles were white. Sign the paper, Malachi, or so help me God, we will drag your hand across the page ourselves. Tyrone shoved the pen into my hand, closing my fingers around the barrel. It felt cold and slick. Just sign on the X, Dad. Right here. He pressed the tip of the pen against the paper, forcing my hand down. Just your name, Malachi Jeffers. Do it. I let my hand tremble, vibrating the pen against the paper, creating a blob of ink. I was stalling, stretching the moment until the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. I cannot see it, I whispered. I need my glasses. You do not need glasses to write your own name, Tyrone yelled. He was sweating now, beads of perspiration rolling down his forehead. We are running out of time. The buyer will be here any minute. Sign the damn paper. I pressed down harder, ripping the paper slightly. Oops, I said, innocent and confused. I broke it. Tyrone let out a scream of pure frustration. He grabbed my hand, his grip painful, and began to force the motion, trying to use my limb like a puppet's arm to forge my own consent. Sign, he grunted through gritted teeth. Sign your name. Suddenly the doorbell rang. The sound was loud and sharp, cutting through the room like a gunshot. Tyrone froze, his hands still gripping mine. Courtney stopped pacing. Mr. Davis jumped in his seat, dropping his briefcase. It is them, Tyrone whispered, his eyes wide. It is Sterling. It is the buyer. He released my hand and scrambled to straighten his jacket. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and ran a hand over his shaved head, trying to compose himself, trying to transform from the abusive son back into the grieving executive. Clear the table, Courtney hissed, grabbing the mugs and the napkins. Hide the medicine, make him look presentable. Tyrone grabbed a napkin and wiped a spot of drool I had artfully allowed to escape my lip. Sit up, Dad, he ordered. Sit up and smile. Do not say a word unless they ask you something. And if they ask you want to sell, understood? I nodded, slowly blinking blankly. Tyrone took a deep breath, fixing a plastic smile on his face, and walked toward the front door. I stayed in the chair, watching Mr. Davis shove the unsigned papers into his briefcase, hiding the evidence of their coercion. I heard the front door open. I heard Tyrone's voice, oily and obsequious. Welcome, please. Come in. We were just expecting you. But the voice that answered did not belong to the imaginary Mr. Sterling. It was a voice I knew well, a voice of granite and authority. Mr. Jeffers, I presume. I turned my head slowly toward the hallway. Tyrone was backing into the dining room, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. He was being corralled by a man who took up the entire doorframe, a man in a charcoal gray bespoke suit with a silk tie and shoes that cost more than Tyrone's car. It was Mr. Wainwright, my attorney, the senior partner of the most prestigious law firm in the state. Behind him stood two men who were clearly not lawyers. They were wide, thick-necked, and wore earpieces. They were security, and not the mall cop variety. These were men who moved presidents. Tyrone looked confused, terrified, and hopeful all at once. Mr. Sterling, he asked, holding out a hand that Wainwright ignored. Did you bring the cash? Wainwright stepped into the dining room, his eyes scanning the space with the clinical detachment of a coroner inspecting a crime scene. He looked at the cheap rental furniture, the fake lawyer sweating in the corner, and finally at Courtney, who was shrinking against the refrigerator. I am not Mr. Sterling, Wainwright said, his voice cool and crisp. And there is no cash because there is no deal. Tyrone's smile faltered. What? What do you mean? We spoke on the phone. You offered $1.5 million. I represent the interests of the owner of this property, Wainwright said, stepping closer to the table. He placed a heavy leather briefcase on the surface, right next to the fake lawyer's cheap plastic folder. I am the owner, Tyrone stammered. I mean, I have power of attorney. My father is incapacitated. Incapacitated. Wainwright raised an eyebrow. He looked at me sitting slumped in the chair. Does he look incapacitated to you, Mr. Jeffers? Or does he look like a man who is tired of waiting for his son to grow a spine? Who are you? Courtney demanded, stepping forward, trying to regain control. Get out of my house. We have a business meeting. This is not your house, Mrs. Jeffers Wainwright said without looking at her. And this is not a business meeting. This is an intervention. Tyrone looked from Wainwright to the security guards to me. He was losing the plot. The narrative he had constructed was falling apart, and he did not know how to fix it. Look, I do not know who you are, but if you are not buying the house, you need to leave, Tyrone said, trying to muster some authority. My father is sick. He needs rest. Wainwright ignored him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles. He put them on and looked at Mr. Davis, the fake lawyer. And you must be the notary, Wainwright said. Are you a member of the state bar? Mr. Davis stood up, grabbing his briefcase. I think I left my car running. I should go. Sit down, one of the security guards rumbled, stepping in front of the doorway. Davis sat down hard, his face pale. Wainwright turned his attention back to the room. He opened his briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like the cocking of a weapon. He pulled out a single-file folder, red and ominous. We are here to discuss the immediate restructuring of the Jeffers family assets, Wainwright said, and to execute the final directives of the account holder. Account holder? Tyrone asked. His voice was barely a whisper. What account? The account that has been paying your mortgage for the last 3 years, Wainwright said. The account that paid for your car, your vacations, and that ridiculous suit you are wearing. The account you tried to access yesterday and found frozen. Tyrone looked at me, confusion warring with horror in his eyes. Dad, he said. Dad, what is he talking about? I sat up slowly. I straightened my spine, shaking off the slump of the old man. I brushed a piece of lint from my trousers and folded my hands on the table. I looked at Tyrone, not with the cloudy eyes of the drugged, but with the clear, sharp gaze of the man who had built a fortune from nothing. He is talking about me, son, I said, my voice steady and strong. Wainwright turned to me, and for the first time since he entered the room, his expression softened into one of deep respect. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of deference that sucked the air out of the room. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Wainwright said. The board is ready for you. The car is waiting outside. Chairman Tyrone whispered the word like it was a foreign language. Chairman of what? I stood up, pushing the chair back. The sound scraped against the floorboards, echoing in the silence. I walked around the table, moving with a grace and power Tyrone had never seen before. I stopped in front of him, standing toe-to-toe with the son who had tried to drug me, rob me, and bury me. Chairman of Apex Innovations, Tyrone, I said. The company you work for. The company where you are a mid-level manager pushing papers. The company I founded 30 years ago under your mother's maiden name. Tyrone's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table to hold. Himself up Apex U. You are the founder. But you are a mechanic, I am an engineer, Tyrone. I corrected him. I have 40 patents in my name. Every time an engine starts in one of those trucks you see on the highway, I get paid. And you work for me. Courtney let out a small, strangled sound. She looked at me, then at the house, then back at me. You have money, she gasped. You have millions. I turned my gaze to her and she flinched as if I had raised a hand. I have more money than you can count, Courtney, I said, but you will never touch a dime of it. Not anymore. I turned back to Wainwright. Arthur, I said, calling the most powerful lawyer in the city by his first name. Do you have the paperwork? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Wainwright handed me the red folder. I took it and tossed it onto the table in front of Tyrone. It landed with a heavy thud. Open it, I ordered. Tyrone opened the folder, his hands shaking so badly he almost tore the cover. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the Apex Innovations letterhead. At the top. It is a termination notice, I said. You are fired, Tyrone, for cause, embezzlement, fraud, and conduct unbecoming of an employee. Security is clearing out your desk as we speak. Fired. Tyrone looked up, tears streaming down his face. Busted, broke, and fired. And one more thing, I said, leaning in close so only he could hear the steel in my voice. I know about the milk, Tyrone. I know about the poison. And so does the police commissioner. He is waiting for us downtown. Tyrone looked at me, and for the first time, he did not see his father. He saw the consequences of his own actions staring back at him, and he was terrified. The ride to the Apex Innovations headquarters was silent as a tomb, wrapped in the smell of expensive leather and conditioned air. I sat in the back of Mr. Wainwright's black limousine, staring out the tinted window, watching the city slide by. My son Tyrone sat across from me, his knees bouncing with a nervous energy that vibrated through the floor of the car. Courtney sat beside him, face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide and calculating, probably trying to figure out how much the car cost to rent. Tyrone leaned forward, his voice a frantic whisper meant only for his wife, but loud enough for me to hear clearly. "This is insane," he hissed, gripping Courtney's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "He has lost it completely. He hired actors, Courtney. That man is not a lawyer. He is probably some old drinking buddy from the VFW. And this car? He must have drained his savings account to rent this. It is a show. It is a delusion. We need to call the hospital as soon as we stop." Courtney looked at him, her eyes darting to me, then back to Tyrone. "I do not know, Ty," she whispered back. "That suit looked real. And the security guards. They are carrying guns. Real guns. Malachi does not know people like that. He is confused," Tyrone insisted, his voice rising slightly in panic. "He thinks he is someone else. It is the dementia. We read about this. The grandiosity, the false memories. We just have to play along until we get him to a doctor. Do not sign anything. Do not say anything. Just let him play out his fantasy." I turned my head slowly and looked at my son. He flinched as if I had struck him. "It is not a fantasy, son," I said, my voice calm and deep. "Enjoy the ride. It is the last time you will be in a car this nice." Tyrone laughed, a brittle cracking sound. "Sure, Dad. Sure, whatever you say. We are just going for a ride." The car slowed down, turning into the private underground entrance of the Apex Tower. Tyrone stiffened. This was his workplace. He drove his leased BMW into the employee garage every morning, parking on the 4th level, reserved for mid-level management. But we were not going to the employee garage. The limousine bypassed the security gate that Tyrone swiped his badge at every day and headed toward a heavy steel barrier marked Executive Access Only. Tyrone smirked, shaking his head. "See?" he whispered. "They are going to stop us. We do not have clearance. You can't just drive in here, Dad. This is a secure facility." The limousine rolled up to the barrier. A security guard in a tactical vest stepped out of the booth. Tyrone rolled down the window, ready to apologize, ready to explain that his father was a confused old man. "Officer, I am sorry. My father is a little," Tyrone started. The guard ignored him completely. He looked into the back seat, saw me, and snapped to attention. His hand went to his brow in a crisp salute. "Good morning, Mr. Jeffers," the guard said, his voice booming. "Welcome back, sir. We have cleared the express elevator for you." Tyrone's mouth fell open. He looked at the guard, then at me, then back at the guard. "You know him?" Tyrone stammered. "You know my dad." The guard looked at Tyrone with a mixture of confusion and pity. "Of course, sir. He owns the building. Proceed, driver." The steel barrier lowered seamlessly into the concrete floor, and the limousine glided forward into the private garage. Tyrone slumped back in his seat, his face draining of all color. "He paid him," Tyrone whispered frantically to Courtney. "He must have paid the guard. It is a setup. It is all a setup." Courtney did not answer. She was looking at the row of reserved parking spots, closest to the elevator bank. There were 3 spots, marked with gold plaques. The first said CEO, the second said CFO, and the third, the largest and closest to the door, simply said Founder. The limousine pulled into the founder spot, stopping with a gentle lurch. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out onto the polished concrete. Tyrone and Courtney scrambled out after me, looking like 2 deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. "This way," I said, walking toward the private elevator without looking back. Tyrone ran to catch up, grabbing my arm. "Dad, stop this. You are going to get us arrested. You cannot just walk into the executive lift. Security will tackle us." I pulled my arm away and pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner on the wall. The panel beeped green, and the heavy steel doors slid open silently. "You son?" I said, gesturing to the open car. Tyrone stepped inside, trembling. He looked at the buttons. There were no numbers, just names. Boardroom, office, helipad. I pressed boardroom. The elevator began to rise, moving so smoothly it felt like we were floating. The numbers on the display climbed higher and higher, past the floors where Tyrone worked, past the floors where his boss worked, all the way to the penthouse level. The doors opened, revealing a lobby with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. The carpet was thick enough to swallow our footsteps. A receptionist sat behind a desk made of white marble. She stood up immediately when she saw me. "Mr. Jeffers," she said, smiling warmly. "The board is assembled in the main conference room. Mr. Wainwright just arrived. They are waiting for you." "Thank you, Sarah," I said, walking past her. "Is the coffee ready?" "Just how you like it, sir. Black, 2 sugars." Tyrone stopped walking. He stared at the receptionist, his eyes bulging. "Sarah," he whispered. "You are—" "Sarah. The Sarah who sends the company-wide emails. The executive assistant to the board." Sarah looked at him politely. "Yes, Mr. Jeffers. And you must be Tyrone. Your father speaks of you often." Tyrone looked at me, and for the first time the wall of his denial began to crack, terrifying fissures running through his reality. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "How does she know you? Why are we here?" "Come inside, Tyrone," I said, pushing open the double mahogany doors at the end of the hall, "and I will show you exactly who I am." The boardroom was a cavern of glass and polished wood. A table long enough to seat 20 people dominated the center of the room. Seated around it were 12 men and women in suits that cost more than Tyrone's annual salary. These were the titans of the industry, the people whose faces were in the magazines Tyrone read, the people he worshipped from afar. At the head of the table, the chairman's seat was empty. The conversation stopped the moment I entered. 12 heads turned. 12 pairs of eyes looked at me with respect and deference. They stood up in unison, a wave of suits rising to greet their commander. "Good morning, Malachi," one of them said. A woman with silver hair and a pearl necklace. It was Eleanor Vance, the CEO of the company, the woman Tyrone had only seen on video calls during quarterly town halls. "Good morning, Eleanor," I said, walking to the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone. Please sit." Tyrone stood by the door, paralyzed. He looked at Eleanor Vance, then at me, then back at Eleanor. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Courtney was hiding behind him, trying to make herself invisible. "Dad," Tyrone squeaked, finally finding his voice. "You cannot sit there. That is the founder's seat." "I know," I said, pulling out the massive leather chair. I sat down, resting my hands on the polished wood. I looked down the length of the table at the men and women who ran my empire. Then I looked at my son, standing by the door, looking like a lost child. "Sit down, Tyrone," I said, pointing to a folding metal chair that had been placed in the corner away from the main table. "You too, Courtney." They shuffled over and sat down, their knees knocking together. Wainwright stood at my right hand. He opened his briefcase and took out a stack of files. He slid one down the table to Tyrone. "Open it," I said. Tyrone opened the file. Inside were patent documents, dozens of them. Detailed schematics for fuel injection systems, hydraulic lifts, and assembly line robotics. They were the blueprints for the machines that powered the entire automotive industry. The machines Apex Innovations built and sold for billions. "Look at the name on the patents, Tyrone," I said. Tyrone squinted at the paper, his hands shaking. "The inventor, it says M. Jeffers, and the assignee, it says the Etta Trust. Etta." Tyrone looked up, tears welling in his eyes. "Mom?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Your mother, Etta. She was the one who encouraged me to file the first patent 35 years ago, when I was just a mechanic tinkering in the big garage. She was the one who managed the books in the beginning. She was the one who suggested we stay in the old neighborhood, keep our heads down, and save every dime because we wanted to build something real, something lasting, not just flash and noise." I leaned forward, my voice hardening. "Apex Innovations is not just a company, Tyrone. It is a legacy. It is your mother's legacy. Every engine we build has a piece of her in it. And you have been walking through these halls for 10 years, strutting around like a peacock, never knowing that the floor you walked on was paid for by the woman you disrespected. I did not disrespect her, Tyrone sobbed. I loved her. You loved her money, I snapped. You loved what you thought she could give you, and when she died, you did not mourn her. You looked for her life insurance. You looked for cash in the walls. You tried to erase her memory from her own bedroom so you could play executive. I stood up and walked over to the wall where a series of framed portraits hung. The first one was a black and white photo of a young man in grease-stained coveralls holding a wrench. Next to him was a beautiful woman with a bright smile, holding a ledger. That is us, Tyrone, I said, pointing to the photo. That is me and Etta, the day we incorporated. We built this, and we built it for you. We wanted to give it to you when you were ready. When you showed us you could handle it. When you showed us you were a man of character. I turned back to him, my eyes blazing. But you failed. You failed every test, Tyrone. You stole, you lied, you treated people like dirt. You treated your own father like a burden to be disposed of. Tyrone was weeping openly now, his face buried in his hands. Courtney was staring at the floor, refusing to look at the photos, refusing to look at the reality of what she had lost. I gave you a job here, I continued. I told the hiring manager to take a chance on you, even though your grades were mediocre. I paid your salary out of my own pocket for the first 2 years, until you actually started earning it. I gave you the bonus structure that paid for your car. I gave you everything, and what did you do with it? You embezzled, you padded your accounts, you gambled it away. And when the well ran dry, you tried to kill the source. The room was silent. The board members looked at Tyrone with expressions of cold disgust. They knew. They all knew. Mr. Wainwright cleared his throat, shattering the silence. Mr. Chairman, he said, handing me another document, the termination protocols are ready for your signature. I took the pen, a heavy gold fountain pen that Etta had given me for our 25th anniversary. I walked over to Tyrone and held the paper in front of him. This is a formal notice of termination for cause, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties at Apex Innovations. Your security clearance is revoked. Your company vehicle is being repossessed in the garage right now. Your company credit cards have been canceled, and your severance package is 0. Tyrone looked at the paper, his eyes wide with panic. Dad, you cannot, he pleaded. I have a mortgage, I have debts. Sal is going to kill me. That is not my problem, I said, signing the paper with a flourish. I am not your father right now, Tyrone. I am the chairman of the board, and you are a liability. I handed the paper to the head of security who had been waiting by the door. Escort Mr. Jeffers and his wife out of the building, I said. Take his badge, take his phone. If he resists, call the police. Tyrone stood up, knocking the metal chair over. Dad, please, he screamed as the guards grabbed his arms. Do not do this. I am your son. I looked at him one last time, my heart breaking, but my resolve harder than steel. My son died a long time ago, I said, turning my back on him. The man standing there is just a thief who shares my last name. Get him out of here. As the guards dragged him screaming toward the elevator, I looked at the portrait of Etta. I did it, love, I whispered. I stopped. It is over. But it was not over yet. There was one more person in the room who needed to answer for her crimes. One more rat to catch in the trap. I turned to Courtney, who was still sitting in the corner, pale and shaking. She looked up at me, terror in her eyes. And now, Courtney, I said, walking toward her, let us talk about the milk. Courtney stood in the corner of the boardroom, watching the heavy double doors swing shut behind her husband. And for a moment, I thought she might collapse, but I underestimated her venom. She straightened her spine, smoothed the skirt of her designer dress, and walked toward the center of the room, her heels clicking on the polished floor like gunshots. She did not look at the board members, who were staring at her with open disgust. Instead, she looked directly at me, her eyes burning with a cold, calculating fury. "You think this is over, Malachi?" she said, her voice shaking, not with fear but with rage. "You think you can just throw us out on the street like garbage because you hid your money in a secret account? That is fraud. It is called concealment of assets. You let Tyrone support you for 3 years. You let us pay your bills. You let us feed you. And now you pull the rug out. This is elder abuse in reverse. You manipulated us into taking care of you while you sat on a fortune. I leaned back in the leather chair, steepling my fingers, watching her perform. She was good. I had to give her that. She was twisting the narrative, trying to find a legal foothold on a cliff face of glass. "Support me," I asked quietly. "You stole from me, Courtney. You pawned my wife's jewelry. You opened credit cards in my name." "I was managing the household finances," she shouted, interrupting me. "And I did a damn good job of it, considering your son is a gambling addict who cannot keep a dollar in his pocket. I am the victim here, Malachi. I married a liar who told me he was an executive, and I got stuck nursing a senile old man in a rotting house. I have rights. I have spousal rights, and I have caregiver rights. If you think I am walking away from this without a settlement, you are out of your mind. I will sue you for every penny. I will sue you for emotional distress, for fraud, and for unpaid wages for every hour I spent cooking your meals and washing your clothes." She turned to Mr. Wainwright, pointing a manicured finger at his chest. "And you," she hissed. "You call yourself a lawyer. You are complicit in this charade. You let an old man play games with his family instead of mediating a solution. I will have your license. I will have this whole board investigated for hostile workplace practices. I am not some weak little girl you can bully. I know the law." She was bluffing, of course. She did not know the law. She knew how to bully people into submission. She was betting on the fact that $1 billion company would rather pay her off to go away than deal with a messy public lawsuit. She was betting on my shame. She thought I would pay to keep the family secrets buried. She looked around the red table, meeting the eyes of the board members. "You all saw it," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He is unstable. He just fired his own son. He humiliated us publicly. This is not the behavior of a rational chairman. This is dementia. Look at him. He enjoys this. He is cruel. Anyone who would treat his family this way cannot be trusted to run a company. I am doing you a favor by exposing him. You should be thanking me." For a second, the room was silent. Courtney stood tall, chest heaving, thinking she had landed a blow. She thought she had planted a seed of doubt. I looked at Kofi, standing in the shadows by the audiovisual console. I gave him a single nod. "Courtney," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "You talk a lot about what you did for me. You talk about cooking and cleaning and caring. Let us see what that care actually looks like, shall we?" Kofi pressed a button on his console. The lights in the boardroom dimmed automatically. The massive screen behind me, usually reserved for quota, global sales projections and stock market analytics, flickered to life. The first image was grainy but clear. It was a video feed from the camera hidden in the smoke detector in my bedroom. The timestamp was from 2 days ago, shortly after the funeral reception. On the screen, Courtney was standing in front of Etta's vanity. She was holding Etta's jewelry box, the one made of rosewood that I had carved for her 30th birthday. She dumped the contents onto the dresser, necklaces, earrings, and brooches, spilling out like a waterfall of gold and silver. The audio kicked in crisp and loud, echoing off the boardroom walls. "Look at this junk," Courtney's voice sneered from the speakers. "It is all old lady trash, gold-plated garbage. I bet half of this is glass." On the screen, she picked up a brooch. It was a small gold hummingbird with ruby eyes. It was the first piece of real jewelry I ever bought, Etta. It cost me 3 months of wages in 1982. "Maybe we can get a few hundred for the gold." "Wait," Courtney said on the video, tossing the brooch into her purse like it was a used tissue. "I hate this house. It smells like dead people and poverty. I cannot wait to sell it and burn the furniture." In the boardroom, the real Courtney gasped. She took a step back, her hand going to her throat. "That is private," she shrieked. "That is illegal. You cannot record me in my own home." "It is not your home," I said calmly. "It is my home, and in my home, I protect my assets." The video changed. It was now the kitchen. The angle was from above, hidden in the light fixture. It was the scene from yesterday morning. Courtney was standing by the stove, holding a frying pan. Tyrone was sitting at the table, his head in his hands. "We need to cut the food budget," Courtney said on the screen, flipping an egg. "Just give him toast and water. He does not need protein. He is just sitting in the attic, rotting. Why waste good food on a dying animal? The sooner he starves, the sooner we can move on." A collective murmur of revulsion went through the boardroom. Eleanor Vance, the CEO, looked like she was going to be sick. She put a hand over her mouth, staring at the woman on the screen with absolute horror. Courtney's face in the boardroom went pale. She looked around, realizing her audience was not sympathetic. They were witnesses to her cruelty. "I was angry," she stammered. "I didn't mean it. It was just stress." Kofi hit the button again. This was the final video, the one from last night, the one that sealed her fate. The screen showed the kitchen again, but this time the lighting was dim. It was night. Courtney was standing at the counter, crushing pills with a spoon. The sound of the grinding was amplified, a harsh, rhythmic scraping. "What are you doing?" Tyrone's voice asked from off-screen. "Making a cocktail," Courtney replied, her voice humming with a cheerful melody. 4 Ambien, 2 Xanax, and a little bit of whiskey just for flavor. It will knock him out cold. "That is too much," Tyrone said. "That could stop his heart." Courtney turned to face the camera, her face illuminated by the under-cabinet lights. She looked demonic, her eyes flat and careless. "If it stops his heart, then our problems are solved," she said, shrugging. "We call the ambulance. We cry. We collect the inheritance. It is a win-win, Tyrone. Now get the milk." The video froze on her face, on that shrug, on that casual acceptance of murder. The lights in the boardroom came back up, blindingly bright. Courtney stood in the center of the room, trembling violently. She looked small now, stripped of her pretense, stripped of her lies. The silence was heavy, suffocating. "That is a deep fake," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You doctored it. It is AI. You made that up to frame me. I never said that." Mr. Wainwright stood up. He picked up a remote control and pointed it at the screen. He zoomed in on the timestamp. "This footage was uploaded to a secure cloud server in real time," Mrs. Jeffers Wainwright said coldly. "The metadata is verified. The chain of custody is unbroken, and we have the physical evidence. The police recovered the residue from the mug you gave Mr. Jeffers. The lab results confirmed a lethal mixture of sedatives and alcohol." Courtney looked at Wainwright, then at me. Her eyes were wild, darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a weapon, looking for anyone who would believe her. "You tricked me," she shouted, lunging toward the table. "You set me up, you old bastard. You wanted me to do it. You pushed us to this. You made us desperate." She grabbed a heavy crystal water pitcher from the table and raised it over her head, aiming for me. She was going to finish the job right here in front of the board. "Security," I said without moving a muscle. Before she could take a step, the double doors burst open. 2 uniformed police officers and a man in a trench coat stepped into the room. The man in the trench coat held up a badge. "Courtney Jeffers, put the weapon down," he ordered, his voice booming. Courtney froze, the pitcher held high, water sloshing over the rim. She looked at the police, then at me. A look of pure hatred contorted her features. "I wish you had died," she screamed, hurling the pitcher at me. It missed, shattering against the wall behind my head, showering me with glass shards and water. I didn't flinch. The officers were on her in a second. They tackled her to the ground, pinning her arms behind her back. She kicked and screamed, cursing me, cursing Tyrone, cursing the world. "Courtney Jeffers, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Malachi Jeffers, fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." As they hauled her to her feet, her dress torn, her hair wild, she looked at me one last time. He knew. She screamed as they dragged her toward the door. Tyrone knew. He watched me do it. He helped me. He is just as guilty as I am. I watched her go, her screams fading down the hallway until the elevator doors dinged shut. I stood up and brushed a piece of glass from my shoulder. The boardroom was silent again, but the air felt cleaner, lighter. I turned to the board members. "I apologize for the disruption," I said, smoothing my tie. "It seems my retirement has been postponed. I have some house cleaning to do." Eleanor Vance stood up, her face pale, but her eyes full of respect. "Take all the time you need, Mr. Chairman," she said. "We will handle the press." I nodded and walked toward the door. Kofi fell into step beside me, handing me a fresh handkerchief. "You okay, Mr. J?" he asked quietly. "I am fine, son," I said, wiping a spot of water from my cheek. "I am just fine." But I was not done. There was one more loose end, one more lie that needed to be exposed. The police had Courtney, but Tyrone was still in the building, and I had one final truth to deliver, a truth that would hurt more than any prison sentence. I walked to the elevator, Mr. Wainwright and Kofi flanking me. "Take us to the security holding area," I said. It was time to reveal the secret I had kept for 35 years. It was time to show Tyrone the DNA test. The securityholding.com area in the basement of the Apex Tower was a stark contrast to the opulence of the boardroom upstairs. It was a room of concrete and fluorescent light designed to intimidate and contain. The police had separated Courtney and Tyrone, but the holding cells were adjacent, separated only by a heavy wire mesh. And as I walked down the corridor, flanked by Kofi and Mr. Wainwright, I could hear them tearing each other apart. It was a sound that vindicated every decision I had made. The facade of their perfect marriage had dissolved, leaving only two rats fighting in a cage. "You are a coward," Tyrone Courtney screamed, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You could not even handle a simple signature. You let him play you. You let a senile old man outsmart you. This is your fault. If you had just been a man and forced him to sign yesterday, we would be on a plane to the Caymans right now." I stopped in the shadows, listening. "Forced him," Tyrone yelled back, his voice cracking with hysteria. "You wanted me to kill him, Courtney. You mixed the poison. You are the one who got greedy with the credit cards. You are the one who needed the black tie party to show off to your fake friends. I ruined my life for you. I stole for you. I betrayed my father for you. And look where it got you," Courtney spat back. "You are broke. You are fired. And you are going to prison. You are a loser, Tyrone. You have always been a loser. That is why I had to take control. That is why I had to make the hard decisions, because you were too weak to do what needed to be done." I signaled to the guard to open the door. I stepped into the light. My presence sucked the oxygen out of the room. Courtney slammed her mouth shut, gripping the wire mesh with clawed fingers. Tyrone slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the dirty floor. His tuxedo ruined his face, a mask of misery. "Dad," Tyrone whispered, looking up at me, hope flickering in his eyes like a dying candle. "Dad, please, tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I did not mean it. I can testify against her. I can tell them everything she did. Just get me out of here." I looked at him and felt nothing. Not anger, not pity. Just a hollow emptiness where my love for him used to reside. "You have already told them everything, Tyrone," I said, my voice flat. "The police have the recordings. You confessed to conspiracy to commit murder. There is no deal to be made. The only thing left is the truth." I turned to Mr. Wainwright. "Give it to him." Wainwright stepped forward and slid a manila envelope through the slot in Tyrone's cell door. It was not a legal brief. It was not a settlement offer. It was a medical report. "What is this?" Tyrone asked, picking it up with trembling hands. "It is the final piece of the puzzle, son," I said. "It is the answer to a question you never thought to ask." Tyrone opened the envelope. He pulled out a single sheet of paper covered in graphs and percentages. He stared at it, his brow furrowing in confusion. "DNA analysis," he read aloud. "Probability of paternity, 0%. Excluded." He looked up at me, then at the paper, then at Courtney. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Who is Leo?" Leo was my grandson, the 3-year-old boy I had bounced on my knee, the boy whose college fund I had already fully funded, the boy I thought carried my name and my blood. "Leo is innocent," I said, my voice softening for the first time. "But he is not a Jeffers, and he is not your son." Tyrone stood up slowly, moving toward the wire mesh that separated him from his wife. He held the paper up against the grate. "Courtney," he whispered, "what is this?" Courtney did not flinch. She did not look away. She laughed, a cold, cruel sound that scraped against my soul. "You are so stupid, Tyrone," she said, leaning against the mesh. Her face was twisted into a sneer of absolute contempt. "Did you really think a child that beautiful came from you? Did you really think I would mix my genes with a man who makes $60,000 a year and drives a leased car?" Tyrone looked like he had been shot. He staggered, backdropping the paper. "Who?" he gasped. "Who is he? Does it matter?" Courtney rolled her eyes. It was someone who could actually help me, someone with power, someone who didn't need his daddy's permission to spend money. "It matters to me," I interjected, stepping closer to the bars. "It matters because I know who it is, Courtney." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "You do not know anything, old man. I know you were working as an intern at the firm 5 years ago," I said. "I know you were assigned to the West Coast expansion project, and I know who ran that project." I turned to Tyrone. "It is Henderson, son. The man you were trying to impress at the party. The man whose shoes I spilled champagne on. He is the father. Henderson. Tyrone screamed the name, tearing at his throat. My boss. You slept with my boss. Courtney shrugged. He was a vice president, Tyrone. He had a future. He had ambition. You were just a stepping stone. You were safe. You were easy to manipulate. And you were desperate for a woman like me, too. Validate your pathetic existence. Henderson did not want to leave his wife, so I needed a chump to pay the bills and play daddy. You fit the profile perfectly. Tyrone let out a sound that was not human. It was the howl of a wounded animal. He threw himself against the wire mesh, clawing at it, trying to get to her, trying to tear her apart. You monster, he shrieked. You took everything. You took my life. You took my son. He is not your son, Courtney yelled back, backing away. He is Henderson's son, and thank God for that. At least he has a chance of not growing up to be a failure like you. The guards stepped in, pulling Tyrone away from the fence. He fought them, kicking and screaming, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot and the sweat. He was broken, completely and utterly broken. I watched him thrash on the floor, watched the realization settle in. He had murdered his relationship with his father for a woman who despised him. He had tried to kill me to secure a future for a child that was not. He had sold his soul, and in return, he had received nothing but ash. That is enough, I said to the guards. They stepped back, letting Tyrone curl into a ball on the concrete. I looked at Courtney. She was panting, her hair wild, her eyes manic. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and defiance. What are you going to do? She asked. You cannot prove Henderson is the father. I do not have to prove it, I said quietly. I already sent the DNA results to his wife. She received them 10 minutes ago. I imagine his life is falling apart right about now, just like yours. Courtney's defiance crumbled. She slid down the wall, burying her face in her hands. And as for Leo, I continued, I have already petitioned the court for emergency custody. Since both his legal parents are about to be incarcerated for attempted murder, and his biological father is about to be in the middle of a very messy divorce, I am the only stability he has. I will raise him, Courtney, and I will raise him to be a man of honor, a man who knows the value of hard work, and I will make sure he never, ever turns out like you. Courtney looked up, tears finally spilling over, real tears, tears for herself. You cannot take my baby, she whispered. You lost your baby the moment you decided to mix poison into a cup of warm milk, I said. You chose money over your child. Now you have neither. I turned away from her, signaling to Wainwright and Kofi that we were done. Wait, Dad, wait. Tyrone scrambled across the floor, reaching through the bars, his hand grasping at the air, trying to catch the hem of my suit jacket. Dad, please, he sobbed, his face pressed against the cold steel bars. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't know I was blind. She made me do it. Dad, help me. I have nothing. I have nobody. Please do not leave me here. I stopped. I looked down at the hand reaching for me, the hand of the boy I had raised, the hand of the man who had tried to sign my death warrant. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, the ache of a father losing his child, but I pushed it down. I locked it away in the same place I had kept my secrets for 40 years. You have a lawyer, Tyrone? I said, my voice cold and distant. Wainwright will recommend a public defender for you. You will have a fair trial. That is more than you gave me. Dad, please, Tyrone wailed. I am your son. I looked him in the eye one last time. My son would never have treated his mother's memory with such disrespect, I said. My son would never have poisoned his father. The man in that cell is a stranger to me. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the heavy steel door, the sound of his sobbing echoing in the corridor, begging for a salvation that was not coming. Let us go, Kofi, I said, not looking back. We walked out of the holding area, leaving the darkness behind us, leaving the wreckage of my family to rot in the cage they had built for themselves. I had lost a son, but I had saved myself. And in the silence of the elevator ride back up to the light, I knew that was the only victory that mattered. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood, a scent that should have been comforting, but instead felt like the inside of a coffin. I sat in the front row, my hands resting on the handle of my cane, not because I needed it to walk, but because I needed something solid to hold on to. The air conditioning was humming a low drone that barely masked the sound of shuffling papers and the nervous tapping of feet. When they brought Tyrone in, he was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung off his frame. He had lost 20 pounds in the 6 months since the arrest. His head was shaved, but the stubble was graying prematurely. He looked old. He looked broken. He scanned the room, his eyes wild and desperate, looking for a friendly face, looking for a lifeline. But when his gaze landed on me, I did not flinch. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply looked through him, as if he were a ghost haunting a house I had already moved out of. Courtney was brought in next. She looked different, harder. The expensive makeup and designer clothes were gone, replaced by the stark uniformity of the prison system. She did not look for anyone. She stared straight ahead, her jaw set in a line of bitter defiance. She knew there was no mercy coming for her today. The prosecutor called me to the stand. "State your name for the record." Malachi Jeffers. I swore to tell the truth, and for the first time in this entire nightmare, the truth was the only weapon I had left. The prosecutor led me through the events, the hidden cameras, the audio recordings, the poisoned milk. I recounted every betrayal with a clinical detachment that surprised even me. I spoke about the theft of Etta's jewelry. I spoke about the fake credit cards. I spoke about the conversation I overheard where they planned to bury me in a pauper's grave. "Mr. Jeffers," the prosecutor asked, pointing to the defense table, "do you see the people who conspired against you in this courtroom today?" I looked at the table. I looked at the lawyers shuffling their notes, trying to find a defense for the indefensible. I looked at Courtney, her eyes burning with hate, and I looked at the empty space where my son used to be, the space now occupied by a stranger in an orange jumpsuit. "Yes, I see them," I said, my voice flat. Tyrone leaned forward, his chains rattling against the table. "Dad," he mouthed the word, silent and pleading. "Dad, look at me." I did not look at him. I looked at the judge. I looked at the jury. I looked at the flag standing in the corner. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a connection. I refused to let him see the pain that was tearing my insides apart. He wanted absolution. He wanted me to acknowledge him as my flesh and blood. But he had forfeited that right when he mixed sedatives into my drink. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a manipulative tyrant. He tried to say I had entrapped them, that I had pushed them to desperation by hiding my wealth. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The video of Courtney crushing the pills, the audio of Tyrone begging the loan shark, the DNA test proving the paternity fraud. It was a mountain of guilt that buried them alive. When the jury returned, it took less than an hour. The foreman stood up, a woman with kind eyes who looked at me with sympathy before she read the verdict. Guilty, on all counts. Tyrone put his head on the table and sobbed, loud, racking heaves that echoed in the silent room. Courtney just closed her eyes, accepting her fate with the cold resignation of a sociopath who knew the game was lost. The judge was not lenient. He called their actions a grotesque violation of the most sacred trust. "Tyrone Jeffers, you are sentenced to 15 years in state prison for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and embezzlement. Courtney Jeffers, for your role as the architect of this plot and for the attempted administration of a lethal substance, you are sentenced to 20 years. The gavel came down, a sharp wooden crack that signaled the end of my family. Tyrone screamed as the bailiffs hauled him up. He shouted my name over and over, begging for forgiveness, begging for a second chance, begging for his father. I stood up and turned my back on him. I walked out of the courtroom, down the long marble hallway, and out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the afternoon. I did not look back. I did not stop walking until the sound of his voice had faded into the background noise of the city. Justice had been served, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. The next day I went back to the house on Oak Street. It was quiet now. The police tape was gone. The staging furniture Courtney had rented had been hauled away, leaving the rooms empty and echoing. It smelled of dust and stale memories. I walked through the rooms, touching the walls where Etta had hung pictures, where we had marked Tyrone's height with a pencil, where we had lived a life that was simple and good before the rot set in. I could not stay here. This house was a crime scene. It was a monument to a lie. I could not sleep in the bedroom where my son had plotted my death. Could not eat in the kitchen where my daughter-in-law had mixed poison. I called a real estate agent, a woman I knew from the old neighborhood, not the flashy broker Tyrone had tried to hire. I told her to list it, sell it fast, sell it cheap, just get rid of it. I did not want a bidding war. I did not want a profit. I wanted an exorcism. Within a week it was sold. A young couple bought it, a mechanic and a teacher, just like Etta and me. They had a baby on the way, and eyes full of hope. I left them the garden tools. I left them Etta's recipes. I left them the ghosts, and I wished them better luck than I had. The proceeds from the sale, along with the liquidation of the assets I had secretly held for Tyrone, came to over $2 million. I did not want it. It was blood money. It was the cheese in the trap that had caught the rats. I set up a meeting with the board of the local community center, the one where Etta used to volunteer. I signed the check over to them with a single condition. They had to start a legal defense fund for the elderly, a fund to protect seniors from predatory family members, to hire lawyers and investigators for people who did not have a Kofi or a Wainwright. I walked out of that meeting with nothing but a suitcase and my freedom. I checked into a small hotel downtown, the kind with clean sheets and no room service. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the one thing I had kept, the one thing I had not sold or donated or burned. It was a photograph of Leo, my grandson, or rather, the boy I had thought was my grandson. He was 3 years old in the picture, smiling with a gap-toothed grin holding a toy truck. He had Tyrone's nose, or at least I had thought he did. Now I knew he had Henderson's nose. Henderson, the vice president who had been fired the day after the DNA results were made public. Henderson, whose wife had taken him for everything he was worth. Leo was innocent. He was the only innocent person in this entire tragedy. Social services had taken him when Courtney and Tyrone were arrested. He was in the system now. A number in a file bounced between foster homes, confused and abandoned, wondering why his mommy and daddy never came back. I thought about walking away. I thought about starting over, completely erasing the Jeffers name, and living out my days on a beach in Mexico. I had the money. I had the time. I owed nothing to anyone, especially not to the child of the woman who tried to kill me and the man she cheated with. But then I looked at the photo again. I saw the fear in his eyes, the uncertainty, and I heard Etta's voice in my head, clear as a bell. Malachi, she would say. Family is not just blood. Family is who you show up for. I put the photo in my pocket and grabbed my coat. I drove to the Department of Children and Family Services. The building was gray and depressing, filled with tired social workers and crying children. I sat in the waiting room for 3 hours, refusing to leave until I saw a caseworker. When they finally called my name, I walked into the office and sat down across from a weary woman named Mrs. Robinson. "I am here for Leo," I said. Mrs. Robinson looked at my file. "Mr. Jeffers, we know who you are. We know about the trial. The DNA results are in the file. You have no biological relation to the child. You have no legal standing." "I know," I said, leaning forward. "But I have standing in his life. I am the only grandfather he has ever known. I am the one who read him stories. I am the one who bought him his first pair of shoes. His parents are in prison. His biological father wants nothing to do with him. He is alone, Mrs. Robinson, and I know what it is like to be alone." "But you are older," she said, looking at my white hair. "Raising a toddler at 68 is not easy. It is a commitment. I raised a son who turned into a wolf," I said, my voice hard. "I failed him. I gave him too much and asked too little. I protected him from the world until he thought he owned it. I am not going to make that mistake again." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a financial statement. It showed the balance of my remaining personal accounts, the money I had earned from my patents, the money that was clean. "I have the means," I said. "I have the time. And more importantly, I have the will. I am not asking to replace his parents. I am asking to save him from becoming them." Mrs. Robinson looked at the statement, then at me. She saw the steel in my eyes, the resolve that had brought down a corrupt executive and put 2 criminals in jail. "It will be a long process," she warned. "Foster care first, then adoption hearings. It could take a year." "I have time," I said. "I am not going anywhere." 6 months later, I walked out of the courthouse for the second time, but this time I was not leaving a criminal behind. I was holding a small hand. Leo walked beside me, clutching a stuffed bear I had bought him. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and trusting. "Papa," he asked, "where are we going?" "We are going home, son," I said, squeezing his hand. "Home." We walked to the car. Kofi was waiting in the driver's seat, smiling. He opened the door for us. "Ready, boss." Kofi asked ready, I said. lifting Leo into his car seat, buckling him in with hands that were steady and strong. We drove away from the city, away from the tower, away from the prison where Tyrone and Courtney were rotting. We drove toward the country where I had bought a small farmhouse with a big yard and a workshop. I looked in the rearview mirror at Leo. He was looking out the window, watching the world go by. He did not know about the poison. He did not know about the greed. He just knew he was safe. I had lost the son of my blood, but I had gained the son of my heart. And this time, I was going to get it right. I was going to teach him that character is worth more than gold, and that the only legacy that matters is the one you build with your own hands. 1 year later, the silence at the edge of the lake was different from the silence that had haunted the house on Oak Street. It was not the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets and betrayal. It was the clean, crisp silence of peace, interrupted only by the gentle lapping of water against the dock and the laughter of a 4-year-old boy chasing butterflies in the tall grass. I sat in a folding chair, my fishing line cast out into the shimmering water, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. Next to me sat Kofi, holding a tablet instead of a fishing pole. He was scrolling through schematics, his brow furrowed in concentration. He had filled out in the last year, eating regular meals at my table and shedding the hoodie for a polo shirt that bore the logo of our new joint venture. "The prototypes for the Sentinel system are ready, Mr. J," Kofi said, not looking up. "We managed to get the cost down to under $50 per unit, motion sensors, voice activation, and a direct link to emergency services masked as a simple digital clock. It is going to change everything for seniors living alone." I nodded, watching the bobber dance on the water. "Good work, son," I said. "And the legal team? Are they ready for the patent filing? Mr. Wainwright says it is airtight." Kofi grinned, looking up at me. "Eda's name is on the paperwork, just like you wanted. The Eda Foundation is going to own the rights, so the profits go back into the community." I looked over at Leo, who was running toward us holding a dandelion like it was a precious jewel. He tripped on a root and fell, but he did not cry. He just picked himself up, brushed the dirt off his knees, and kept running. He was resilient. He was safe. "Papa, look," Leo shouted, thrusting the weed into my hand. "A flower for you." "Thank you, Leo," I said, tucking it into my shirt pocket. "It is beautiful." I looked at the two of them, the young genius who had saved my life, and the innocent child who had given me a reason to keep living. They did not share my blood. Kofi was the son of a neighbor. Leo was the son of a stranger. But they were my family. They were the people who showed up, the people who respected me, the people who loved me without conditions. I had spent 40 years building a fortune for a son who wanted me dead. I had spent the last year building a home for the people who wanted me alive. The difference was staggering. We packed up the gear as the sun began to set, casting long purple shadows across the water. We had a meeting in the city the next morning with the city council to discuss deploying the Sentinel system in public housing. I felt a sense of purpose I had not felt since the early days of Apex Innovations. I was not retired. I was just getting started. The next morning, I drove my truck into the city. It was a new truck, a heavy-duty model with leather seats and a quiet engine, but it was still a truck. I liked the height. I liked seeing the road. I stopped at a red light in the downtown district, right near the financial center where Tyrone used to strut around in his Italian suits, thinking he owned the sidewalk. The streets were busy, filled with people rushing to jobs they hated, chasing money they did not need. Movement on the side of the road caught my eye. A city sanitation crew was working their way down the block, picking up litter and emptying the trash cans. They wore bright orange vests and heavy gloves, their faces obscured by the brim of their caps. One of them was struggling with a heavy bag. The plastic had ripped, spilling coffee cups and food wrappers onto the pavement. The man cursed, kicking the trash in frustration, before bending down to scoop it up with his hands. I knew that posture. I knew the slope of those shoulders, the way he held his head. It was Tyrone. He had taken a plea deal, Wainwright told me later, admitting to the fraud and the theft in exchange for a suspended sentence and 5,000 hours of community service, plus restitution. He was not in a cell, but he was in a prison of his own making. He was broke, blacklisted from every corporate job in the state, and forced to clean up the garbage of the people he used to look down on. He stood up, wiping his gloved hands on his orange vest. He looked old. His face was lined with bitterness, his eyes dull and hollow. He looked up and for a second, our gazes locked across the lane of traffic. He saw me. He saw the new truck. He saw the suit I was wearing, the suit of a man who was meeting the mayor. He saw the peace in my eyes. He took a half step toward the curb, his mouth opening as if to call out, "Dad." The light turned green. I did not look away immediately. I held his gaze for one long heartbeat. I let him see that I recognized him. I let him see that I knew exactly who he was. And then I let him see that it did not matter anymore. I did not feel anger. I did not feel the need to roll down the window and spit on him. I did not feel the urge to rescue him either. The instinct to save him, the instinct that had cost me so much money and so much heartache was gone. It had been burned away in the fire of his betrayal. I pressed the accelerator. The truck moved forward, smooth and powerful, leaving him behind, leaving him on the curb with his trash and his choices. I watched him shrink in the rearview mirror, a small orange dot in a gray city, until he disappeared completely. People say blood is thicker than water, as if that is an excuse for abuse, as if sharing DNA gives someone the right to drain your life. But I learned the hard way that sometimes blood is toxic. Sometimes the limb is gangrenous, and if you do not cut it off, it will kill the whole body. I did not lose a son that day. I drove away. I freed myself from a stranger who had been wearing my son's face. I turned the corner, heading toward the meeting where Kofi and Leo were waiting for me. The road ahead was clear, the sun was shining, and for the first time in a long time, I was driving toward a future that belonged entirely to me. I am Malachi Jeffers, and I survived my own family. If you are holding on to someone who hurts you just because you share a last name, let this be your sign. Let go. The life you save will be your own. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to make a hard choice to save your own peace. Hit like and subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption. I will see you in the next one. We are raised to believe that blood is thicker than water, that family must be protected at all costs. But I learned the hard way that sometimes blood is just a biological accident, and toxic family members are nothing more than anchors dragging you to the bottom. True family is not defined by DNA. It is defined by loyalty, respect, and who stands beside you when the storm hits. My greatest victory wasn't building an empire or exposing a crime. It was realizing that walking away from people who hurt you is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of survival. Peace is the only luxury truly worth fighting for. If you have ever had to make the hard choice to cut off a toxic family member to save your own peace, let me know your story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice.